Chapter 821. Divine Dr. Bailey's tone was very solemn. Ji Tianqing also understood that the demonic goo in his father's body must be removed. Otherwise, he would be consigned to eternal damnation. But, once the demonic goo is removed, my father will die within 3 days. He stared at Divine Dr. Bailey with eyes full of anxiety. Divine Dr. Bailey shook his head and comforted him with a firm tone, "Don't be afraid. I'm here. I'll do my best to maintain his soul energy and won't let him die so quickly. Of course, I'm only explaining the situation to you. In the end, you still have to make the final decision." Ji Tianqing was silent. He was hesitating, weighing the pros and cons. Thousands of thoughts flashed through his mind as his heart suffered great torment. At this moment, the unconscious Ji Changkong suddenly let out a muffled groan. It was probably because his physical injuries had mostly healed and the demonic qi that invaded his body had been dispelled. He actually slowly woke up. Ji Tianqing was immediately delighted. He quickly turned to look at Ji Changkong and bent over to check the situation. Ji Changkong slowly opened his eyes and stared fixedly at him. Ji Tianqing anxiously asked, "Father, you're finally awake?" However, Ji Changkong stared at him with wide eyes and did not say anything. "Ah!" Suddenly, Ji Changkong stretched out his hands at lightning speed and frantically grabbed at him. He even let out a wild beast-like howl. Ji Tianqing was stunned for a moment and almost had his neck strangled by Ji Changkong. Fortunately, he managed to dodge in time and quickly took 3 steps back. At this moment, he discovered that Ji Changkong's eyes were actually blood-red. His pupils seemed to be burning with blood-red flames as if he had gone mad. Roar! Ah! Ji Changkong's skin was as red as fire as he howled like a mad demon. He actually jumped up from the ice jade bed and pounced at Ji Tianqing while waving his arms. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing was sorrowful and his eyes turned red. Of course, he could see that his father had lost his mind because of the demonic goo. He was like those descendants of wealthy families who had been infected by the demonic goo and had turned into a mad demon who willfully slaughtered the innocent. His father had always been a kind and gentle person. He had devoted his entire life to nurturing him and protecting him at all costs. A father's love was like a mountain, and his kindness was as great as the sky. But now, his father's intelligence had been devoured by the demonic goo, and he had actually become like this. They were all damned demonic goo. Ji Tianqing was filled with grief and indignation, but he had no choice but to restrain his father. He raised his right hand and slapped his father's back. Shwa! A black vortex appeared on his right palm. It was the mysterious black hole. The black hole released a powerful suction force that invaded Ji Changkong's body. In the blink of an eye, the demonic goo was sucked out. When Ji Tianqing withdrew his right hand, there was a ball of golden light in his palm. It wrapped around a strange dark purple insect. It was the demonic goo. Since Ji Changkong had yet to start a massacre, the demonic goo insect had yet to devour too much flesh and soul. Therefore, it was still dark purple and had yet to turn purplish black. When the demonic goo was forcefully extracted, Ji Changkong's body suddenly stiffened. He opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. Then, he fell straight onto the ice jade bed. He fainted again and lay motionless on the ice bed. His life force had become extremely weak. Ji Tianqing handed the demonic goo to Yun Zhongqi and said in a serious tone, "Uncle, only by burning the demonic goo to ashes with the extreme yang primordial fire can it be completely destroyed." Yun Zhongqi nodded. He channeled a wisp of extreme yang primordial fire and started burning the demonic goo. The demonic goo struggled desperately in the golden extreme yang primordial fire. It screeched in pain, but it was quickly burned to ashes. At this moment, Miracle Dr. Bailey hurriedly took out 2 soul-grade elixirs. He channeled his energy to catalyze the elixirs and turned them into an endless stream of spiritual light that was injected into Ji Changkong's body. When Ji Chankong's breathing had stabilized, Miracle Dr. Bailey used a secret technique to carefully examine Ji Chankong's injuries. After 15 minutes, Miracle Dr. Bailey finished his spell. He looked at Ji Tianqing with a serious expression. Tianqing, the demonic goo has been removed. However, the injuries to your father's soul are too severe. I'm afraid he will pass away in a few days. Even if I do my best and use soul-grade elixirs and medical skills to treat him, I can only delay his death for another 5 to 6 days. Although Ji Tianqing already knew that this would be the result, he was still filled with grief when he heard that his father only had 5 to 6 days left to live. He looked at Miracle Dr. Bailey with eyes full of hope. He asked in a low voice, "Master, you're a world-renowned miracle doctor. You must have a way to save my father, right?" Miracle Dr. Bailey shook his head. His expression was solemn and his tone was filled with helplessness. His soul has already been shattered. His 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls have been separated. Moreover, he was severely injured by the demonic goo. I'm not a god. No matter how good my medical skills are, it's impossible for me to reconstruct his soul and change his fate. Miracle Dr. Bailey could feel Ji Tianqing's grief. He also wanted to save Ji Chankong. However, he was still a human and not a god. He was still helpless when it came to Ji Chankong's injuries. Seeing Ji Tianqing's grief, Miracle Dr. Bailey could not bear it. He said to him, "Tianqing, I can only do my best to extend your father's life and let him live for a few more days. During this period of time, I still need to look through ancient books and documents to see if I can find a way to reconstruct his 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls and resolve the demonic goo. Leave your father to us for the time being. You should quickly recuperate and recover your strength. The more difficult it is, the stronger you must be. You must not fall." Yun Zhongqi also hurriedly comforted Ji Tianqing. He and Miracle Dr. Bailey were both spirit refinement realm experts. With them looking after Ji Tianqing could rest assured. Thus, he returned to the spiritual liquid pool and continued to meditate to recover his strength as soon as possible. Time quietly passed. Unknowingly, 2 days had passed. Ji Tianqing's strength had completely recovered. He had returned to his peak state. He did not leave the secret room. He had been guarding beside the ice jade bed. His heart was filled with worry and anxiety. Ji Chankong was still unconscious. His aura was as weak as ever. Miracle Dr. Bailey and Yun Zhongqi had to take turns using secret techniques every day to extend Ji Chankong's life and prevent his 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls from dissipating. Not only that, Cloud Soul Palace had to take out a few soul-level pills every day to help Ji Chankong stabilize his soul. Soul-level pills could only be refined by spirit refinement realm experts. Furthermore, refining pills required the consumption of spirit energy. It would take months to years. Thus, every soul-level pill was incomparably precious. They were truly priceless treasures that could not be bought with money. Only a top force like Cloud Soul Palace could take out 5 to 6 soul-level pills every day to maintain Ji Chankong's life. However, Cloud Soul Palace did not have many soul-level pills in storage. At most, they could last for another 7 to 8 days before they ran out of pills. That night, Yunyao rushed back to Cloud Soul Palace from the Monarch Palace. She had already received news that Ji Chankong was severely injured and was about to die. Thus, she rushed back to Cloud Soul Palace to visit him. After returning to Cloud Soul Palace, she went straight to the secret room to find Ji Tianqing. She asked him about Ji Chankong's situation with concern. Chapter 822. In the dark secret room, there were only 3 people present. The unconscious Ji Chankong, the worried Ji Tianqing, and Yunyao. Yunyao had already visited Ji Chankong. She was also very sympathetic and worried about Ji Chankong's situation. However, since her grandfather and father were helpless, she naturally could not do anything. She could only silently pray for Ji Changkong. The atmosphere in the secret room was as gloomy as usual. After the two were silent for a while, Yin Yao said to Ji Tianqing, "Tianqing, the situation in the 100 cities in Zhongzhou has become more and more chaotic recently. The demonic goo is causing chaos, causing the people to be in a state of panic. The imperial court of the human race and the demon race, as well as the lords of the 100 cities, are doing their best to search for the demonic goo. However, they are unable to control the situation. The 100 cities are in chaos. Countless people die every day. Some die because of the demonic goo, some die because of the demonic goo. The monarch mansion has no choice but to take action." The day before yesterday, Divine Teacher He Yu gathered all the princes to discuss countermeasures. Hearing this, Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and asked doubtfully, "What's the result of the discussion? How is the monarch mansion going to deal with this?" Yin Yao said in a serious tone, "The princes of the human race and the demon race are naturally filled with righteous indignation. They can't wait to gather all the experts in the world to kill all the demonic goo that invaded Zhongzhou." However, the princes of the water race reacted calmly. It has nothing to do with them. In the end, Divine Teacher He Yu ordered all the princes to carry out missions to search for the demonic goo in the main cities of Zhongzhou. Every prince is in charge of a city. I was sent to Yuejian City while the Son of Heaven went to Gale City. In addition, a few divine teachers from the monarch mansion will also lead a large number of guards to patrol the various cities in Zhongzhou. I came back to see you today. Tomorrow, I will rush to Yuejian City to carry out the mission." Ji Tianqing nodded, "That's good too. I hope the monarch mansion's intervention can stabilize the situation in Zhongzhou. However, I still have to protect my father. I can't carry out the mission of the monarch mansion." Yin Yao quickly nodded and comforted him, "Tianqing, don't worry. When I found out about this, I explained the situation to God Teacher He Yu. Divine Teacher He Yu understands your difficulties and didn't say much. He won't blame you either." Ji Tianqing responded and chatted with Yin Yao for a while before sending her out of the secret room. Early the next morning, Yin Yao left Cloud Soul Palace and hurried to Yuejian City. Ji Tianqing was still guarding the secret room, keeping an eye on Ji Changkong's situation. He could only look at his unconscious father and feel that his father's aura was getting weaker and weaker, but there was nothing he could do. On this evening, Divine Dr. Bailey walked into the secret chamber with a complicated expression. Ji Tianqing quickly turned to look at him and asked expectantly, "Master, have you found a way?" He had asked this question several times in the past 2 days. Although the answer he got every time was disappointing, he still didn't want to give up. Divine Dr. Bailey nodded and said with a complicated tone, "Tianqing, I do have a way, but it's a little what?" Ji Tianqing was delighted and quickly asked, "Master, please tell me. No matter how difficult it is, it's fine as long as there's hope." Divine Dr. Bailey hesitated for a moment before saying with a solemn expression, "I've looked through many ancient books and documents and finally found a way to save your father. In the myths and legends of the ancient times, there was once a great war between the gods. In that earth-shattering battle between gods, the gods unleashed a destructive power that caused the galaxies to collapse, countless stars to fall, and even the sky was broken. After the war ended, the surviving gods had no choice but to forge a divine weapon called the Heaven-Mending Pearl to mend the broken sky." Ji Tianqing was stunned when he heard Divine Dr. Bailey's story. He frowned and said, "The galaxy collapsed. Even the sky was broken. This kind of miraculous and illusory legend is basically made up by our predecessors. How can we believe it? Moreover, what does this legend have to do with saving my father?" Divine Dr. Bailey nodded slightly and said with a solemn tone, "I also feel that this legend is too unrealistic and can't be believed, so I'm a little hesitant. However, there are some clues that I have found. Perhaps there is a glimmer of hope. The legendary divine weapon, the Heaven-Mending Pearl, has an unimaginable and extraordinary effect. It can connect the 9 heavens and the netherworld, go against the heavens, change fate, and reform the soul. The heaven-mending pearl can even mend the sky, let alone reconstruct your father's soul. Ji Tianqing nodded and restrained the doubts in his heart. He said, Master, please continue. Divine Dr. Bailey continued, if it's just a legend, I naturally won't believe it and won't come to you. However, I've found some clues. According to the ancient legend, after the gods mended the sky, the mysterious heaven-mending pearl, which gathered the power of the gods, was lost in the buried star sea of the central continent. The buried star sea was not a sea, but an extremely dangerous forbidden land of death. It was hidden in the deepest part of the Azure Cloud Mountain range. For thousands of years, countless martial experts had entered the buried star sea to search for the legendary divine weapon, the heaven-mending pearl. However, the buried star sea was too dangerous. Even a soul-refining realm expert would have a slim chance of survival if they entered. For nearly 1,000 years, many experts had entered the buried star sea, but 99% of them never returned and died in the buried star sea. Of the few experts who came back alive, none of them could find the heaven-mending pearl. Did the heaven-mending pearl really exist? Was it lost in the buried star sea? These were all mysteries. No one could verify whether the legend was true or not. However, one thing was certain. The buried star sea was indeed a forbidden land of death. The environment was dangerous and every step was dangerous. There were also many powerful mutated beasts from ancient times. In the past 200 to 300 years, no one dared to explore the buried star sea, so the legend was gradually forgotten. Hearing this, Ji Tianqing's expression turned serious, and he frowned. He knew that mutated beasts were powerful creatures that were between spirit beasts and divine beasts. They were mysterious and unfathomable, and they were extremely powerful. Many mutated beasts had never been seen by the world, and they were species that were not recorded in history books. Taking the risk to enter the buried star sea to search for the legendary heaven-mending pearl for an illusory legend was definitely an unwise move. However, Ji Tianqing watched as his father's life gradually slipped away, and he walked towards death step by step. His heart ached as if it was being stabbed by a knife. He was silent for a long time. After careful consideration, he finally made up his mind. Master, thank you for telling me this clue. Although I know that the legend is very illusory, and the hope of finding the heaven-mending pearl is very slim. However, I have no choice. Even if I go to heaven or hell, I won't give up. I can't watch my father die without doing anything. Chapter 823. To Ji Tianqing, his father was the closest and most important person to him in this world. Even if there was only a glimmer of hope, even if he had to risk his life, he would not give up. No matter what, he did not want to watch his father die without being able to do anything. He had already made up his mind to ask Divine Dr. Bailey about the star burial sea. Divine Dr. Bailey looked at him and asked in a serious tone, the buried star sea is the most dangerous forbidden land of death in the central continent. The heaven-mending pearl being lost in the buried star sea is only a legend. Tianqing, do you really want to go to the buried star sea? You have to think it through. Ji Tianqing nodded and asked in a helpless tone, other than this, what else can I do? Dr. Bailey was silent and did not know what to say. Indeed, this was the only way and hope. He could understand Ji Tianqing's feelings and did not try to dissuade him. Instead, he explained to Ji Tianqing, the buried star sea is an area in the depths of the Green Cloud Mountain range. It is shrouded in thick fog all year round. It is said that it is a forest that has existed since the ancient times. It is shrouded in an invisible mysterious force and isolated from the rest of the world. There are many demonic beasts and ancient beasts living there. Not only do they have special bloodlines, but they also have all kinds of incredible abilities. Even a bird or a beetle in the buried star sea could be poisonous enough to kill a Sky Prime expert. Even a single stalk of grass or a single leaf in the forest could kill a person, in short, there are all kinds of strange dangers there that are impossible to guard against. If you enter the buried star sea, you have to be very careful. Dr. Bailey used half an hour to tell Ji Tianqing all the information he knew in detail. He also warned Ji Tianqing seriously and with great concern that he had to be careful and not be careless. Apart from that, he also thought of something else, and his expression instantly became solemn and serious. "Oh right, Tianqing, I thought of something very important. 300 years ago, the palace master of the monarch mansion issued a ban that forbade anyone from the monarch mansion from exploring the buried star sea." Ji Tianqing had just remembered divine Dr. Bailey's instructions, and was thinking about what preparations he should make. Suddenly hearing this news, his face changed. Frowning in confusion, he asked, "The palace lord of the monarch manor? Didn't the prefecture master disappear for 200 years? Why did the palace lord forbid the people of the monarch mansion from exploring the buried star sea? Neither the divine masters nor the imperial princes of the imperial palace were allowed to venture into the sea of buried stars. Did the star burial sea have something to do with the monarch mansion? Or is the mansion master related to the star burial sea?" Facing Ji Tianqing's series of questions, divine Dr. Bailey could only respond with a regretful expression. He shook his head and said, "Master also doesn't know what's going on. It's just that I suddenly remembered that there was indeed such a ban back then. In the past 300 years, almost no one had explored the buried star sea, so the disturbance brought about by this ban had faded away. Moreover, the palace lord of the monarch mansion is the strongest person known in the Tianxian continent, and also the most mysterious person. Other than a few divine masters, no one knows whether the palace lord is a man or a woman, or what he looks like. I'm afraid only the palace lord himself knows why he issued such a ban." Ji Tianqing frowned and said in a serious tone, "So what if there is such a ban? I will definitely go to the buried star sea, even if it means going against the monarch mansion's ban." After all, he was now in Cloud Spirit Palace and not in the monarch mansion. If he secretly went to the buried star sea, the monarch mansion might not know. After making up his mind, Ji Tianqing began to prepare for his trip to the buried star sea. Divine Dr. Bailey also found Yun Zhongqi and explained the matter to him, telling him about Ji Tianqing's decision. Yun Zhongqi had also heard of the legend of the buried star sea and knew how terrifying that place was. He did not object to Ji Tianqing's decision, but his heart was filled with worry. That night, the three of them discussed this matter in Yun Zhongqi's study. The study room was brightly lit, clearly illuminating the faces of the three people. The three of them looked very serious, and their brows were filled with worry. Yun Zhongqi looked at Ji Tianqing with a burning gaze and said in a serious tone, "Tianqing, divine Dr. Bailey has already told you about how terrifying the buried star sea is. I know that you have made up your mind, so I won't dissuade you anymore. However, you must be careful and not be careless. If you can't do it, don't put yourself in danger. Try your best to protect yourself. I believe that your father doesn't want you to lose your life to save him." Ji Tianqing nodded to show that he understood. He said in a serious tone, "I will keep your advice in mind. There is not much time left. I have to set off at dawn tonight and rush to the Azure Cloud mountain range as soon as possible. In the few days after I leave, I hope that uncle and master will take care of my father." This time, he was going to the buried star sea alone to find the legendary heaven-mending pearl. Divine Dr. Bailey had to stay by Ji Chankong's side at all times. Every day, he had to cast a secret technique and use soul-grade pills to prolong Ji Chankong's life. Not only did Yun Zhongqi have to help divine Dr. Bailey, but he also had to oversee the situation in Cloud Spirit Palace. After all, the situation in Zhongzhou was chaotic. The mess left behind by the Duanmu clan's destruction had yet to be resolved, and the demonic venomous insects were wreaking havoc in the 100 cities in Zhongzhou. If Yun Zhongqi wasn't overseeing Cloud Spirit Palace, there would be even more chaos. After hearing Ji Tianqing's words, Yun Zhongqi hurriedly nodded and said, "Tianqing, don't worry. We will take good care of your father. I can't accompany you to the buried Star Sea, so I can only prepare some pills and talismans for you. I hope they can help you." After saying that, Yun Zhongqi took out a black interspatial ring and handed it to Ji Tianqing. There were more than 30 jade bottles in the interspatial ring. They contained all kinds of spirit pills and miraculous medicines. There were pills for external injuries, internal injuries, recovery, meditation, detoxification, and so on. Other than that, there were also a few Dharma artifacts and more than a dozen talismans with different effects. Yun Zhongqi was very thoughtful. These things were exactly what Ji Tianqing needed to explore the buried Star Sea. He didn't bother to be courteous with Yun Zhongqi. He thanked him and accepted the interspatial ring. At that moment, a bright light flashed in the dark night sky outside the window. The three of them were about to talk when they were suddenly awakened by the bright light. They all turned their heads to look outside the window. They saw a dark golden thunderbolt in the distant horizon. It descended from the sky and cut through the dark night sky. The golden thunderbolt was extremely tall and long. It emitted a sacred golden light. It was like the might of a god, illuminating the boundless night sky. Golden thunderbolt descending from the sky. Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and revealed a puzzled expression. He vaguely felt that the golden thunderbolt was a sign of something. Miracle Dr. Bailey frowned and thought for a moment. He said in a serious tone, "This is a phenomenon that will only appear when someone advances to the spirit-refining realm." Yun Zhongqi looked at the night sky outside the window. When the golden thunderbolt disappeared and the night sky returned to darkness, he said in a complicated tone, "Look at where the golden thunderbolt is pointing. It seems to be in the direction of the imperial court." Chapter 824. Ji Tianqing knew that when someone advanced to the soul-tempering realm, there would be a heaven and earth phenomenon. This was also one of the reasons why soul-tempering realm cultivators were different from mortals. When different cultivators advanced to the soul-tempering realm, the heaven and earth phenomenon would be different. However, the heaven and earth phenomenon caused by most people was golden lightning breaking through the sky. Only a few extremely talented soul-tempering realm cultivators would cause special heaven and earth phenomena, such as red clouds filling the sky, night as bright as day, meteors falling, and so on. Since Yun Zhongqi determined that the golden lightning was pointing in the direction of the imperial court, it undoubtedly meant that the imperial court had a new soul-tempering realm cultivator. This was a joyous event worthy of celebration. It was also news that would definitely shake the entire central continent. However, Ji Tianqing's mind was only filled with his father's pale and weak face, as well as the news about the buried Star Sea. He did not care about the fact that the imperial court had a new soul-tempering realm cultivator. After the night sky returned to darkness, the three of them retracted their gazes and continued their discussion. An hour later, the plan was decided. Divine Dr. Bailey and Yun Zhongqi would stay in Cloud Spirit Palace to take charge of the situation and look after Ji Changkong. They would cast spells to extend Ji Changkong's life every day. Ji Tianqing did not waste any time. He left Cloud Spirit Palace that night and rushed to the Azure Cloud Mountain Range to find the buried Star Sea. According to Divine Dr. Bailey's estimation, with his and Yun Zhongqi's methods, they could only help Ji Changkong maintain his life for another 5 days at most. In other words, Ji Tianqing had to find the heaven-mending pearl within 5 days to save Ji Changkong. Otherwise, Ji Changkong would definitely die in 5 days. The buried Star Sea was extremely dangerous, and the legend of the heaven-mending pearl was also illusory. Ji Tianqing wanted to find the heaven-mending pearl within 5 days, which was harder than ascending to the heavens. However, even if he knew that the hope was very slim, he had to try his best and not give up. At the same time, in the sky-connecting mountain range. On the sky-connecting peak, the imperial court was brightly lit, surrounded by colorful light and spirit qi. Although it was night, the sky above the imperial court was shrouded in colorful spirit clouds, revealing a sacred and majestic aura. Many cultivators were alarmed and looked up at the sky, revealing expressions of amazement and envy. Even many of the imperial court guards were whispering to each other. They were very excited and proud. Everyone understood that such a phenomenon was definitely the appearance of a new soul refinement expert in the imperial court. Moreover, according to the phenomenon of the heavens and the earth tonight, that newly advanced soul refinement realm expert had a great foundation and extremely high natural talent. His future accomplishments were limitless. Some of the guards and experts looked at the Sky Dragon Palace in the depths of the imperial court through the aura of the heaven and earth phenomenon. According to the guidance of the heaven and earth anomaly, they guessed that the person who caused the heaven and earth anomaly, the new soul tempering expert, should be in the Sky Dragon Palace. The many guards and servants in the Heavenly Dragon Palace rejoiced. Outside a secret room in the depths of the palace stood a tall and sturdy young man with a head full of red hair. He stood respectfully at the door of the secret room. His dark red eyes stared at the door of the secret room. His face was full of excitement. He was Tuoba Rui. Great! I didn't expect Godfather to successfully step into the soul refinement realm before the age of 40. Tonight, the imperial court is shaken. When the news spreads tomorrow, the middle state will also be shocked. Tuoba Rui murmured excitedly. His emotions were surging like a tide. After a while, when the phenomenon of the heavens and earth above the imperial court gradually dissipated, the door of the secret room slowly opened. With a muffled rumble, the heavy stone door slowly rose. When the stone door of the secret room opened, a surge of vast and mighty spiritual chi surged out of the secret room like a wave. Tuoba Rui was overjoyed. He quickly stepped into the secret room and walked to the spiritual liquid pool in the corner of the secret room. He saw that the spiritual liquid in the pool had been completely devoured. A tall and sturdy young man with a handsome and resolute face was sitting cross-legged on the golden spiritual throne in the spiritual liquid pool. This person was bare-chested and wore a golden dragon crown on his head. His body flickered with dense five-colored spiritual light and exuded a powerful and domineering aura. He slowly stopped cultivating and opened his eyes. When he opened his phoenix eyes, a terrifying light flashed in his eyes. It actually tore apart the five-colored spiritual mist in front of him. Just a gaze was like the power of a sword. This was the strength of a soul refinement realm powerhouse. Tuoba Rui walked to the spiritual liquid pool and bowed respectfully. He said excitedly, "Congratulations, Godfather. Congratulations, Godfather. Tonight, Godfather has achieved great success. You have transcended the mortal realm and stepped into the transcendent realm. From now on, you will be famous and awe-inspiring." Tuoba Rui's voice was powerful and his tone was vigorous and excited. It was obvious that his blood was boiling. The third prince looked at him majestically and nodded slightly. He looked indifferent and said calmly, "That's right. I have successfully stepped into the soul refinement realm before the age of 40. I can be called the youngest soul refinement realm powerhouse in the continent. In the entire imperial court, all the princes combined are inferior to me. That damn Long Yun Shao, what qualifications does he have to compete with me? From now on, there will be no place for Long Yun Shao in the imperial court." The third prince's eyes flashed with a terrifying cold light. He curled his lips into a sneer and exuded a domineering aura. Tuoba Rui did not dare to look directly into his eyes. He lowered his head in fear and trepidation. After a while, the third prince's aura and domineering aura dissipated. The sneer on his lips also disappeared. He frowned and said in a low and dignified voice, "However, I was too impatient to break through to the soul refinement realm. Originally, I would have needed at least 2 years to achieve a breakthrough. However, the Duanmu clan was destroyed and the central state was in chaos. It was the best time for me to achieve my ambition. Therefore, I used the power of the divine altar to forcefully break through to the soul refinement realm." Hearing this, Tuoba Roy's excitement immediately calmed down. He asked worriedly, "Godfather, won't your martial Dao foundation be damaged and affect your future cultivation?" The third prince nodded slightly and said indifferently, "It will indeed damage my martial Dao foundation. In the future, it will be difficult for me to make any progress in my cultivation. It will be impossible for me to break through to the primordial soul realm. However, I have already thought of a countermeasure. I just need to go to the buried star sea to find a heaven-devouring beast, and use the power of the divine altar to feed it with divine venomous worms. This will solve my problem." The third prince did not explain how to solve his problem. He only mentioned the heaven-devouring beast and divine venomous worms. Tuoba Roy knew that this was his godfather's biggest secret, so he did not dare to ask. He frowned and said worriedly, "Godfather, before you went into seclusion, you asked me to gather information about the buried star sea and the ancient beasts. I have already prepared. The buried star sea is extremely dangerous, and the ancient beasts are extremely powerful. I am worried that you—" Before he could finish speaking, the third prince smiled confidently and waved his hand. "I have already entered the soul refinement realm and have the divine altar. What do I have to fear? Go and prepare immediately. I will leave secretly tomorrow morning and go to the buried star sea alone." Chapter 825. Early in the morning, cold winds blew. Ji Tianqing flapped his golden wings and flew above a lofty mountain range. His speed was as fast as lightning. He had been flying at full speed for several hours now, from dawn until now, without a single moment of rest. This time, he was heading to the buried star sea alone, only bringing the little black dragon and Qianyu with him. As time passed, the sun rose from the east, gradually climbing high into the sky, then slowly slanting to the west until it fell over the horizon. The journey was very dull, and as Ji Tianqing flew, he recalled what had happened. On that day, when he had gone to Mount Tranquil to rescue his father, Burial of Heaven had appeared at the crucial moment to save his father. At the time, the situation had been urgent and he had many questions, so he had not had the time to ask Burial of Heaven. Later on, in the days at Cloud Soul Palace, he had been so preoccupied with his father's injuries that he had no time to discuss this matter with Burial of Heaven. Now that he was on the road, he recalled the events of that day and called out in his mind, "Burial of Heaven, are you still asleep?" A few moments later, Burial of Heaven's voice rang out in his mind, calmly saying, "I have not lost much of my vitality, so there is no need for me to sleep." That's also true." Ji Tianqing grunted in response, then hurriedly asked, "Burial of Heaven, you had been in the Kenshin tomb this entire time and had never appeared, so I thought that you would not be able to show yourself. Was it because I devoured the several hundred years of energy of the ancient green maple tree that allowed you to recover so much of your vitality that you were able to manifest?" Burial of Heaven hesitated for a moment, then vigorously explained, "Yes, but not entirely. The several hundred years of energy of that ancient tree truly did allow me to recover much of my vitality. However, I am only a broken sword soul. My main body can only be sealed in the sword steel or stored in a divine sword. The black-robed figure that I manifested that day was a soul avatar of mine. Using a soul avatar consumes a great deal of energy. In the end, I recovered too little of my strength, so that soul avatar of mine was rather weak. If I could recover 50% of my strength, that soul avatar of mine would have been able to easily kill those two demon commanders." Soul avatar. I see. Ji Tianqing was suddenly enlightened. His tone was full of expectation as he asked, "Then, can you teach me the soul doppelganger's secret technique? Also, can you teach me the two sword techniques that your soul avatar used?" He knew very well that only primordial soul realm supreme being experts could display a true primordial soul avatar. If he could have a clone, then he would be too powerful. He would be able to do many things that ordinary experts couldn't. There were endless uses for it. As for the sword technique used by the Burial of Heaven's clone, it was incomparably marvelous and unparalleled, which made him very tempted. Burial of Heaven paused momentarily before replying in a solemn voice, "You'll have to wait until you reach the soul refinement stage before you can attempt to cultivate my doppelganger secret technique, but there's no guarantee that you'll succeed. As for my clone sword art, you can cultivate it after you've mastered the sword heart Tao. That was the sword soul Tao. You'll have to wait until you reach the soul refinement stage before you can cultivate it. So, after mastering the sword heart Tao, I'll have to cultivate the sword soul Tao. But I'll have to wait until I reach the soul refinement stage before I can cultivate it." Ji Tianqing was instantly filled with depression. Whether it was the soul doppelganger secret technique or the sword soul Tao, he was extremely eager to cultivate and master them. However, the foundation of cultivating these two powerful secret techniques was to reach the soul refinement stage. He remained silent and didn't say anything more. The desire in his heart to improve his strength was becoming more and more urgent. Unknowingly, night fell. Ji Tianqing was still flying high in the sky. He didn't stop midway and didn't even slow down. He had already crossed thousands of mountains and rivers, but he was still very far from the Azure Cloud mountain range. The biting cold wind in the sky blew his white robe and long hair, but it didn't shake his determination and willpower. The long night passed quickly. When the sky brightened again, he finally arrived at the Azure Cloud mountain range. His expression was firm as he calmly looked at the vast mountain range in front of him. He muttered in his heart, "I've finally arrived at the Azure Cloud mountain range. I'll soon reach the buried star sea." The Azure Cloud mountain range was located southwest of Central State City, more than 30,000 miles away. This area was between the human race imperial court and the demon race imperial court. It was a place where people rarely went. Because of the existence of the buried star sea, the Azure Cloud mountain range had become a forbidden area. It was incomparably dangerous and ordinary cultivators didn't dare to enter. As Ji Tianqing flew high in the sky, he saw that the endless towering mountain range was filled with lush ancient forests. Towering trees that were dozens of meters tall could be seen everywhere. He didn't need to enter the forest to know that the Azure Cloud mountain range was filled with endless spiritual flowers and herbs. There were also countless demonic beasts. After all, the sky above the mountain range was filled with rich spiritual energy and the fragrance of spiritual flowers and herbs. There were flocks of demonic beasts and birds flying in the sky, letting out crisp cries. The roars of demonic beasts constantly came from the mountain range. Occasionally, there would be powerful demonic beasts fighting, making earth-shattering sounds. When Ji Tianqing crossed the many towering mountain ranges, there would be some ignorant demonic beasts and birds that rushed over to attack him. These demonic beasts and birds that hadn't come into contact with humans for a long time had low intelligence and were very aggressive. They also treated him as a prey. The results were indisputable. Most of these demonic beasts and birds were high-tier demonic beasts, whose strength was equivalent to the mystic comprehending realm. Ji Tianqing couldn't be bothered with them. He easily broke through the encirclement of the demonic beasts and continued on his way. If he encountered some demonic beasts that were chasing him relentlessly, he would release thousands of sword lights with a wave of his hand, mincing the demonic beasts and birds into pieces. Blood splattered across the sky. Just like that, a day passed quickly. He only reached the depths of the Azure Cloud mountain range in the evening when the sun was setting in the west. Thick clouds gradually appeared in the clear sky in front of him, covering the sky and the sun. The mountain range also became much lower. There were no longer towering mountains and steep peaks. There were only winding mountain ranges that were thousands of meters high lying in the vast sea of trees. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing revealed a look of anticipation. He muttered in a low voice, "A boundless sea of trees, thick white clouds that cover the sky and the sun. Looks like this is the buried star sea." He lowered his flying altitude and flew close to the sky above the vast sea of trees toward the buried star sea that was shrouded in clouds and mist. However, Just as he was about to reach the buried star sea and was about to enter the vast sea of clouds and mist, a five-colored spiritual light suddenly lit up in the sky behind him. A tall and thin figure was wrapped in that dazzling five-colored spiritual light. It was a middle-aged human dressed in a black robe. The outline of his face was as angular as a rock. His eyes were as deep as the night sky, containing an indifferent and aloof temperament. He sped high in the sky, his speed as fast as the aurora. Every step he took could cover a distance of 5 kilometers. Chapter 8:26. The sudden appearance of the black-robed expert caused Ji Tianqing to stop flying. He stood above the vast forest and frowned as he looked at the black-robed man in front of him. His heart was filled with vigilance. When he looked at the black-robed man was also looking at him. He was expressionless and his eyes were indifferent. Ji Tianqing, how dare you? The black-robed man exuded a cold and dignified aura as he shouted angrily. Ji Tianqing was not unfamiliar with this voice. When he saw the black-robed man's face, his expression changed and he frowned. Divine Master Heiyu. Why are you here? Without a doubt, the black-robed expert who had appeared out of nowhere was Divine Master Heiyu of the monarch residence. Divine Master Heiyu looked at him with a dignified expression and said coldly, "If I did not come to stop you, you would have made a big mistake today." Hearing this, Ji Tianqing immediately understood. Divine Master Heiyu had already known that he was going to explore the buried star sea. However, he could not understand. He had rushed to the buried star sea from Cloud Spirit Palace and had been very secretive. How had he been discovered by Divine Master Heiyu? Divine Master Heiyu, how did you know about this? His heart was filled with doubts and he could not help but ask. Divine Master Heiyu frowned and said indifferently, "Ever since you entered the monarch residence, your performance has been outstanding and you have made a name for yourself in the central region. Of course, I would pay attention to you. I originally thought that you were a good seedling that could be nurtured and taken care of, so I have been paying attention to you. I did not expect you to be so foolish. The mansion master has already given a strict order to forbid anyone from entering the buried star sea. How dare you defy the mansion master's order?" Hearing Divine Master Heiyu's words, Ji Tianqing's emotions became complicated. Originally, he had caught the attention of Divine Master Heiyu and could become an elite that was heavily nurtured. This was something to be happy and proud about. However, under such circumstances, he could not feel happy at all. He pondered for a moment and looked at Divine Master Heiyu with a solemn expression. He said solemnly, "Divine Master Heiyu, thank you for your attention and care. However, I believe you already know that my father was injured by 2 demon marshals and was implanted with demonic goo. He is in imminent danger and only has a few days left to live. As a son, how could he look on helplessly as his father was about to die and remain indifferent? Since you've come to stop me today, I'll be frank. Even if I don't become the imperial prince of the monarch mansion, I'll enter the star burial sea to find a chance to save my father." In any case, he had risked his life to enter the monarch mansion just for Yun Yao and to be recognized by the Cloud Spirit Palace. Now, in order to save his father, even if he was expelled from the imperial residence, he would have no regrets. God Sovereign Heiyu was furious. Disappointment flashed in his eyes as he expected better from Jian Wushuang. This is ridiculous. The legend of the buried star sea is just an illusory legend. How can you believe it? Moreover, the star burial ocean is extremely dangerous, and even soul refinement realm experts might lose their lives there. Aren't you just giving your life away for nothing if you charge in like this? How noble was Divine Teacher Blackfeather's status? He was definitely not a talkative person. He was willing to say so much to Ji Tianqing because he cherished talents. He couldn't bear to see Ji Tianqing charge into the star burial sea to die, so he tried to dissuade him. How could Ji Tianqing not understand this? He bowed to Divine Teacher Blackfeather and said solemnly, I thank Divine Teacher Black Feather for your concern, but I have a reason that I must go. I can't give up even a trace of hope. Divine Teacher Black Feather frowned as he looked at Jian Wushuang. After a moment of silence, he could only sigh helplessly. Sigh. Fine. Since you've made up your mind, then go. I only hope that you will be careful in everything you do and not be careless. After saying that, Divine Teacher Black Feather flicked his sleeves and left. His figure flashed a few times and disappeared into the horizon. Ji Tianqing looked at his back as he left. After a moment of silence, he turned and flew into the thick white fog. Swoosh! When he passed through the fog, he felt as if he had passed through an invisible barrier, as if he had entered another world. After a moment, he passed through the barrier of the mysterious fog and truly entered the buried star sea. The view in front of him suddenly opened up and presented a different scene. He stood in the sky above the vast forest and saw that the sky above him was covered by thick white fog as if it was a heavenly barrier. The light in this world was dim, and there were strands of five-colored spiritual energy floating in the air. There were low mountain ranges on the ground, covered by the dark green forest and lying between heaven and earth. Above the forest, there was light green spiritual energy. It was the rich greenwood spiritual energy. Ji Tianqing did not need to circulate his spiritual energy. His greenwood spiritual body burst forth with an invisible devouring power, attracting the greenwood spiritual energy from all directions and gathering it into his body. He suddenly felt refreshed. The exhaustion in his body and mind was swept away, and he became full of energy. The greenwood spiritual body kept absorbing the greenwood spiritual energy to replenish the true core power that he had consumed. He had just flown 1,000 meters away and was sizing up the scene in the buried star sea. Suddenly, a huge golden bird flew out from the valley 10 miles in front of him. The bird was so fierce that it seemed to be able to fight the sun and the moon. Its wings were 100 meters wide, which seemed to be able to cover the sky and the sun. Its body was covered with dark golden feathers, which were shining with golden light and emitting a powerful aura. Ji Tianqing took a closer look and saw that the golden bird was holding a huge demonic beast as big as a palace in its sharp claws. The demonic beast was as white as jade. It was an ancient demonic beast, the celestial jade elephant. However, it was covered with blood and wounds. It was caught by the golden bird. It struggled to no avail, so it could only let out a long and miserable cry. Chirp! The golden bird let out a crisp chirp. It grabbed the celestial jade elephant and flew to the end of the sky. Soon, it disappeared. Ji Tianqing stared at the scene with his mouth agape. His heart was filled with shock. The celestial jade elephant was as powerful as a cultivator in Sky Origin stage. However, it was scratched by the golden bird and could not resist at all. Obviously, the golden bird was as powerful as a cultivator in the soul tempering stage. It was also an ancient demonic beast. What kind of demonic beast is that golden bird? It seems like it's even more powerful and mysterious than the heavenly wind flaming bird that guards the herb garden. Ji Tianqing thought. Then, the voice of the burial of heaven sounded in his mind. That is a demonic beast, the golden crow. It has a trace of the golden rock's bloodline. The most powerful member of the tribe can reach the peak of the primordial spirit stage and trigger the 9 heavens thunder tribulation. He's actually so powerful. Ji Tianqing couldn't help but be secretly astonished. As soon as he said that, the voice of the burial of heaven sounded again. I can sense that this place is not good. It is full of the aura of countless demonic beasts in the soul tempering stage. You must be careful. Also, I have a vague impression that I have been here with Kenshin. Chapter 827. The burial of heaven's words startled Ji Tianqing for a moment, and then he was overjoyed. Burial of heaven, you came here with Kenshin back then? Then do you know the legend of the heaven-mending orb? Are you familiar with the terrain of the buried star sea? Do you know where I can find the heaven-mending orb? The burial of heaven immediately went silent, as if recalling the events of the past. Ji Tianqing remained silent, waiting expectantly. However, before the burial of heaven could answer, he suddenly discovered two pairs of dark red eyes staring straight at him from the forest not far to his left. The two pairs of dark red eyes were as big as water tanks, and they flickered with a frightening, ominous glint. However, their figures were hidden in the dense forest, making it impossible for others to see their true faces, let alone what kind of demon beasts they were. Ji Tianqing discovered that the two pairs of blood-red eyes were spying on him, and he was immediately alarmed. He became highly vigilant and alert. When he saw the two pairs of blood-red eyes, the two pairs of eyes also saw him. Then, the dense and calm sea of trees suddenly began to ripple violently, as if a stormy sea had suddenly been set off by a storm. Whoosh! Countless dense branches and leaves parted in all directions, and an empty area with a radius of several hundred meters appeared in the forest. Two dark brown ferocious exotic beasts as large as palaces appeared from the forest. The two exotic beasts looked very much like crocodiles, but their bodies were covered in pitch-black scales, and two pairs of wings grew from their ribs. They flapped their wide wings, stirring up a shocking gust of wind that blew all the towering trees in a radius of 5 kilometers, causing branches and leaves to fly everywhere. Ayo! The two ferocious giant beasts flew at Ji Tianqing as fast as lightning, opening their bloody mouths full of sharp fangs and fiercely pouncing at him. The auras of these two ferocious giant beasts were extremely powerful, and their strength was comparable to a half-step soul refinement realm expert. When Ji Tianqing saw the two giant beasts appear, he already realized that things were not good. A half-soul tempering realm beast was already troublesome enough to deal with, but there were actually two of them at the same time. Moreover, he didn't even know what species the two giant beasts were. He didn't understand those giant beasts at all. Of course, he wouldn't take the risk and engage in a meaningless battle. When the two ferocious beasts pounced on him, he turned and ran without hesitation. Shwa! He flapped his golden wings and turned into a golden streak of light. He shot into the distant sky like a bolt of lightning, heading towards the depths of the buried star sea. The two ferocious beasts also let out ferocious roars and flapped their wings to give chase. In the blink of an eye, the two giant beasts had caught up with Ji Tianqing. They were only 300 meters away from him. This was the best distance for a half-step spirit refinement realm beast to attack. Without hesitation, they opened their mouths and roared with invisible sound waves, which instantly enveloped an area of 20 miles. Buzz! The formless sound waves swept across the sky in an instant, creating layers of ripples in the calm sky. The forest within a radius of 20 miles was destroyed and collapsed without a sound. Countless towering trees and endless flowers and grass were all turned into dark green powder and scattered on the ground. Ji Tianqing was not prepared at all. He didn't expect the two ferocious giant beasts to use such a strange killing move. Caught off guard, he was dizzy on the spot. Stars appeared in his eyes as blood flowed from the corner of his mouth and nostrils. His entire head became dizzy and numb. He only felt that the world was spinning and he almost fell from the sky. Damn it! These two damn giant beasts. They look so ferocious, but they actually use such a despicable attack. In his mind, the two giant beasts were ferocious beasts with immense strength and terrifying destructive power. Shouldn't they be able to spit fire and water to destroy the heavens and earth? Fortunately, he had cultivated the ultimate sword body. His physical defense was incomparably strong, so he wasn't seriously injured by the formless sound waves. If he was an ordinary divine prime expert, he would have exploded and turned into minced meat by the formless sound waves. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the two giant beasts pounced in front of him. They opened their bloody mouths and bit down viciously. Their gigantic bodies brought with them tornadoes and exuded an extremely powerful pressure. Instantly, Ji Tianqing's expression changed. Clearly, the two giant beasts were not only good at sound wave attacks, they were also ferocious in close combat. They were truly powerful and had terrifying destructive power. At this critical moment, Ji Tianqing suddenly raised his head and looked at the two giant beasts with a cold, murderous look in his eyes. The two giant beasts had angered him. They were definitely going to die. Burning Sky Palm. At the critical moment, Ji Tianqing raised his left arm that was as red as magma and slapped out a gigantic flaming palm that covered the sky towards the two giant beasts. The distance between them was too close. The two giant beasts were only about 30 meters away from Ji Tianqing. When the burning sky palm struck out, they didn't even have time to react. They were instantly hit by the giant flaming palm and were sent flying. Bang! A deafening sound exploded and shook the heavens. At that moment, the dazzling fire lit up half the sky. The area within a radius of 30 miles was drowned in fire, turning into a sea of fire. The green powder on the ground was instantly burned into black ash by the raging fire. The ground was also scorched. The dense forest around the open space was also set ablaze by the raging fire. As for the two giant beasts, they were sent flying by the burning sky palm. Their gigantic bodies were engulfed by the raging fire. The burning sky palm struck their bloody mouths, and actually caused a huge hole to appear in their mouths. White bones were exposed, and fresh blood sprinkled down from the sky. They flew backward for over 10 miles in the sky, then fell down from the sky and smashed into the dense jungle. Ji Tianqing had severely injured the two giant beasts with one move. However, he didn't have the intention to escape. He actually chased after them and used his ultimate killing move to kill the two giant beasts on the spot. Sword of Judgment. The golden sword embryo flew out and turned into a giant golden sword that was 30 meters long. It soared with golden flames and grew a pair of golden wings. The giant sword exploded with a power that could pierce through heaven and earth. It fell from the sky and blasted towards one of the giant beasts. The giant beast was stunned. It didn't expect that Ji Tianqing, their food, would have such terrifying strength. Just as it struggled to fly up, it was hit by the Sword of Judgment. Bang! The indestructible Sword of Judgment pierced through the giant beast's head and killed it on the spot. Its corpse fell into the ruins and blood splattered everywhere. It was still twitching in pain. The other giant beast was terrified when it saw its companion killed. It flew up into the sky without hesitation and ran for its life. Ji Tianqing used two ultimate skills consecutively and consumed a lot of vital essence. He didn't chase after the giant beast and let it escape. He glanced at the giant beast's corpse in the ruins and kept the sword embryo. He was about to turn and leave. At this moment, Burial of Heaven's voice sounded in his mind. You finally killed a wind patrol beast. Isn't it a pity to throw its corpse away? Hearing Burial of Heaven's voice, Ji Tianqing stopped and turned to look at the giant beast's corpse that was still twitching. This giant beast is a wind patrol beast. Could it be that its corpse has some value or use? Of course. Burial of Heaven explained in a serious tone, it's a rare ancient beast that's about to reach the soul-tempering realm. Even its fur, bones, and teeth can be used as materials to refine artifacts. It must be very valuable. Chapter 828. Ji Tianqing was startled by Burial of Heaven's words, but he immediately understood. Right, how could I have forgotten about this? In the world of martial arts, there were hundreds of millions of martial artists from different races. There were all kinds of people who did all kinds of martial arts-related occupations. Among them, there were martial artists who hunted demon beasts for sale. They were equivalent to the hunters of the mortal world. Not only could all kinds of metals, jade, and gems be used as refining materials, demon beast corpses, demon cores, demon crystals, and so on could also be used to refine equipment and artifacts. Even the commonly seen high-level demon beasts and great demons were hunted and captured by countless martial artists to earn spirit stones. If the corpse of an ancient beast like the Scout Wind was used as refining materials, it would definitely sell for a good price. Ji Tianqing had been short on money recently. He didn't have many cultivation resources and wealth. When he cultivated in the future, his consumption would be even greater. He had to think of a way to earn more resources. Hearing Burial of Heaven's reminder, he hurriedly dug out the Scout Wind's corpse and looked for its soul crystal. Every part of an ancient beast was a treasure. Any random fur or bones could be exchanged for a lot of spirit stones. Unfortunately, the Scout Wind's corpse was too big. The interspatial ring couldn't fit it. Otherwise, Ji Tianqing would have taken the whole corpse. He would definitely have made a fortune. In the end, he only dug out the Scout Wind's eyes, demon cores, and a dozen or so precious beast bones. Other than that, he also found a fist-sized white crystal in the Scout Wind's head. The Scout Wind's corpse was scattered all over the ground. The thick smell of blood had already attracted the attention of some nearby demon beasts. After Ji Tianqing collected his spoils of war, he hurriedly left the ruins. A quarter of an hour later, he had flown over 100 miles before he stopped and hid in a valley to rest. He took out a wash-basin-sized dark red demon core and the white crystal from the interspatial ring. He held the white crystal and carefully examined it. He asked doubtfully, "Burial of Heaven, is this the soul crystal of a Scout Wind?" "Correct." Burial of Heaven replied in a deep voice, "This wind patrol beast is currently attempting to break through to the soul refining realm. Its soul crystal has yet to fully condense, so the soul force it contains is rather weak. However, it's better than nothing. At least it can help me recover some of my strength." "Okay, then swallow the monster core and soul crystal together." Ji Tianqing nodded and raised his right hand to activate the mysterious black hole in his palm. Shwa! The black hole rapidly expanded, turning into a black whirlpool, swallowing Scout's Yaodan and soul crystal. In the blink of an eye, the huge Yao core and soul crystal disappeared, and the black vortex also shrank back into his palm. Ji Tianqing withdrew his right palm and hurriedly asked Burial of Heaven, "Burial of Heaven, how much of your strength can the beast core and soul crystal of this wind patrol beast help you recover?" 5%. Burial of Heaven snorted and said arrogantly, 5%. You underestimate me too much. Perhaps 10 of the same Yaodan and soul crystal would be enough to help me recover 5%. This. Ji Tianqing was immediately speechless. He thought to himself, then wouldn't I have to kill 20 half-step soul refining realm exotic beasts to recover 10% of Burial of Heaven's strength? The reason why he was able to kill that wind patrol beast so easily was because he caught it off guard and used 2 trump cards in a row. The process seemed fast and easy, but in fact, he had used up 40% of his true essence. However, Ji Tianqing thought about it from another perspective. The Yaodan and soul crystal of exotic beasts could help Burial of Heaven recover his strength. This was definitely great news. At the very least, he didn't have to passively wait for Burial of Heaven to recover his strength. Who knew how long that would take? He could take the initiative to kill exotic beasts and seize their Yaodan and soul crystal to help Burial of Heaven recover his strength. This was undoubtedly the fastest method. Burial of Heaven, why didn't you tell me about this method earlier? Otherwise, I would have gone to hunt demon beasts long ago and help you recover your strength as soon as possible. Burial of Heaven said in a solemn tone, only the Yaodan and soul crystal of exotic beasts above the soul refining realm can help me recover my strength. Half-step soul refining realm exotic beasts can barely be used. Those ordinary great demons and demon kings are completely useless to me. You're quite picky. Ji Tianqing's expression stiffened as he muttered in his heart. After a moment of silence, he recalled the matter from before and asked, Burial of Heaven, you still haven't answered my question from before. You came here with Kenshin. Then do you know anything about the heaven-mending orb? Burial of Heaven replied in a low voice, I seem to have heard a little about the legend of the heaven-mending orb. As for what happened back then, I'm a broken sword soul now. There are many things that I can't remember. All right. Ji Tianqing replied helplessly, then urged, then focus on devouring the Yao Dan and Soul Crystal. I hope you can recover some strength and remember what happened back then. After saying that, he stopped communicating with Burial of Heaven. He hurriedly took out 2 True Essence recovery pills and swallowed them, circulating his qi to refine the medicinal effects. Unknowingly, an hour had passed. Ji Tianqing's True Essence had recovered by 30%, and he was still circulating his qi to cultivate. However, at this moment, in the sky a dozen kilometers away from him, 4 huge black figures were flying towards him at lightning speed. Those 4 dark brown figures were 400 meters long wind patrol beasts with ferocious and violent auras. One of the wind patrol beasts was the one that had fought with Ji Tianqing and fled in a panic. Obviously, it had returned to find its companions to take revenge. The 3 wind patrol beasts following it were all a realm higher than it. They had all reached the spirit-refining realm. Furthermore, the 3 wind patrol beasts had different appearances. One had a rhinoceros-like horn, one had 8 legs, and the last one had 2 heads. Although they were all wind patrol beasts, they had different appearances due to the different talents and abilities they inherited from their bloodlines. This was the special characteristic of wind patrol beasts. They could inherit the bloodlines of many spiritual beasts and divine beasts, eventually forming a new kind of beast with powerful special abilities. After a short while, the 4 wind patrol beasts flew to the sky above the valley with murderous looks on their faces. They released their spiritual senses to search for Ji Tianqing's traces. Ji Tianqing was immediately alerted. He raised his head and looked at the sky, just in time to see the 4 wind patrol beasts searching the valley. Damn it! The intelligence of these wind patrol beasts is actually not inferior to humans. They even know how to find experts to help them take revenge. The sky above the valley was sealed. He couldn't fly away. That would be equivalent to walking right into a trap. As such, he secretly deployed the Earth Emperor shield and burrowed into the ground, escaping into the distance. However, how could he hide from the 4 wind patrol beasts when he used the power of his true origin? The moment he burrowed into the ground, the 3 spirit-refining wind patrol beasts locked onto his aura with their souls. They roared and pounced at him. The 3 wind patrol beasts' enormous bodies smashed into the valley like 3 mountains, creating a huge crater in the valley. Dust and dirt flew everywhere. Boom! 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 The loud sounds echoed through the sky, echoing endlessly and spreading over 100 miles. The mountains around the valley collapsed, turning into ruins and piling up in the valley. Ji Tianqing escaped from the ground in a sorry state. He flew into the sky with a pale face, panting heavily. The 3 wind patrol beasts' all-out attack had caused him internal injuries. Blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. Seeing the 4 wind patrol beasts roaring and charging at him, he hurriedly took out the seal of mountains and rivers and resisted with all his strength. At the same time, in the sky above the sea of trees 100 miles away from the valley, a tall and sturdy young man in a golden robe was flying at high speed. He was the 3rd prince, Long Zitian. He had just entered the buried star sea not long ago and had yet to be attacked by the ancient beasts. Suddenly, he heard the muffled sound from 100 miles away. He immediately frowned and revealed a puzzled expression. After hesitating for a moment, he sped up and flew towards the valley where the sound came from. Update 8, 4 days of continuous outbreaks have come to an end. Starting tomorrow, the updates will return to normal. Little he will notify you in advance if there are any more outbreaks. Chapter 829. It said that powerful ancient beasts can be seen everywhere in the buried star sea. It's extremely dangerous. The sounds of fighting in front. Could it be that ancient beasts are fighting? The third prince muttered in his heart, feeling a little puzzled. He flew across the sky at lightning speed. In a short while, he had flown more than 100 miles and arrived above the valley. He saw that the deep valley below had long been reduced to ruins. The mountains around the valley had collapsed and collapsed. The sky was still filled with dust, as well as the raging spiritual energy. The third prince glanced at the scene in the valley. Then, he crossed the valley at lightning speed and continued to fly forward. Not long after, he saw a few huge figures in the sky dozens of miles ahead. They were fighting fiercely in the sky. There were a few huge ferocious beasts. They were as fast as lightning as they flew back and forth. They were attacking a tiny figure from all sides. Both sides continued to unleash dazzling light that blotted out the sky and covered the earth. Intense collisions erupted and caused earth-shattering rumbling noises that resounded throughout the land within a radius of tens of miles. 5 colored spirit lights kept bursting out, illuminating the sky for dozens of miles. A raging hurricane blew in the sky and spread out in all directions. It also destroyed the dense forest on the ground, turning it into a desolated ruin. The 4 ferocious beasts took turns to attack the tiny figure. Their murderous aura surged, and their attacks were extremely violent. They seemed to have the power to destroy the world. As for that tiny figure, it dashed left and right amidst the storm that filled the sky, constantly circling around and fighting as it fled into the distance. Seeing this scene, the third prince's expression changed, and he frowned. His eyes were fixed on the besieged figure, and his eyes were filled with shock. Someone actually entered the buried star sea before me. In the past 200 to 300 years, almost no one had come to explore the buried star sea. Many cultivators had almost forgotten about this forbidden area. Even the third prince had to go through countless ancient books and records before he could find this forbidden area. However, he did not expect to meet a human cultivator who had entered the buried star sea not long after he entered. Moreover, that human cultivator had obviously entered earlier than him. Who is that person? Why does he look so familiar? The third prince hid in the distance and secretly observed the figure. Suddenly, he saw some clues. He hurriedly used a secret technique to make his body blurry and transparent. It was as if he had merged with the sky, leaving only a faint shadow. This was a secret technique similar to the invisibility technique. Although it couldn't really achieve the effect of invisibility, it could conceal one's figure and restrain one's aura, making it difficult for others to detect. The third prince quietly flew across the sky and approached the figure that was fighting with the 4 giant beasts. Not only did he have to guard against being discovered by that figure, but he also had to guard against the 4 ferocious giant beasts. About a quarter of an hour later, he chased for 200 miles and finally saw the appearance of the figure. It's him. The third prince's pupils shrank as a cold glint appeared in his eyes. The corners of his mouth curled up into a sneer. He actually entered the buried star sea. This is great. The heavens are really helping me. Ji Tianqing, you little bastard, you're really courting death. After recognizing that the figure was Ji Tianqing, the third prince's heart was filled with a strong desire to kill. He almost couldn't help but rush forward and use his most powerful killing move to kill Ji Tianqing on the spot. However, he held back the impulse in his heart. He hid in the dark and continued to observe the situation. No, those 4 giant beasts are quite powerful. 3 of them have reached the soul refining stage. If I rush forward recklessly, I will be surrounded by those giant beasts before I can kill Ji Tianqing. After all, they don't distinguish between friend and foe. I can't be hasty. I have to find the best opportunity to kill him in one strike. I won't give him a chance to escape. Thinking of this, the third prince calmed down. He followed Ji Tianqing and the 4 giant beasts, patiently waiting for the opportunity to kill. Ji Tianqing was besieged by the 4 wind patrol beasts. He was in an extremely dangerous situation. With his strength of Sky Origin Stage LV7, and with the help of a few powerful magical weapons, he could still deal with 2 Wind Patrol beasts. Being besieged by 4 Wind Patrol beasts, he couldn't fight back at all. All he could do was to dodge and escape. Especially the 3 Soul Refining Stage Wind Patrol beasts. 2 of them were as powerful as LV2 Soul Refining Stage beasts. They were as fast as lightning, and their strength was limitless. They were rampaging in the sky, bursting with destructive power. More terrifyingly, they were also releasing silent soul attacks, which kept attacking Ji Tianqing's soul. After fighting for less than 15 minutes, Ji Tianqing was already covered in wounds. Even his soul was injured. Luckily, he had all kinds of trump cards and magical weapons to protect himself. That was why he could hold on until now. At this moment, the 2 strongest Wind Patrol beasts released dozens of dazzling white light beams, which were like a rain of arrows shooting towards Ji Tianqing. Those light beams were condensed by soul power. They were so fast that they instantly covered Ji Tianqing's figure. At this critical moment, he dove into the Seal of Mountains and Rivers without hesitation. Boom! 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 The dozens of soul light beams instantly hit the house-sized Seal of Mountains and Rivers. The Seal of Mountains and Rivers was blasted away, flashing with golden light. Luckily, the Seal of Mountains and Rivers blocked most of the soul light beams. Ji Tianqing wasn't injured. However, just as the Seal of Mountains and Rivers fell from the sky, the 4 Wind Patrol beasts surrounded it. They waved their huge claws and slapped at the Seal of Mountains and Rivers. Immediately, the Seal of Mountains and Rivers was slapped by the Wind Patrol beast's giant claws, causing a series of loud bangs as it violently smashed into the forest below. A 100-meter-wide crater was formed on the ground. Dust flew up into the air, and violent energy waves erupted. The Seal of Mountains and Rivers sank into the soil at the bottom of the crater. Its power was weakening, and its golden light was dimming. Ji Tianqing was filled with anxiety. His heart was burning with worry, but there was nothing he could do. In the previous 15 minutes, he had used the Seal of Mountains and Rivers to block hundreds of attacks. That was why he could hold on until now. If it weren't for the protection of the Seal of Mountains and Rivers, he would have been blasted into pieces by the 4 Wind Patrol beasts. However, the power of the Seal of Mountains and Rivers was limited. After withstanding hundreds of attacks, its power was almost depleted. No, I have to find a way to break out of this encirclement and get rid of these 4 Wind Patrol beasts. Otherwise, I'm going to die here today. Ji Tianqing gritted his teeth and immediately made up his mind. He was going to risk it all. When the 4 Wind Patrol beasts descended from the sky, he instantly put away the Seal of Mountains and Rivers and opened the 3rd eye on his forehead. It was a golden eye with a blue pupil. It contained an incomparably violent lightning energy. Lightning! Ji Tianqing roared furiously. He released an endless amount of lightning energy. It condensed into a lightning beam and blasted at one of the Wind Patrol beasts. That Wind Patrol beast was the fastest and the strongest. It had reached the 2nd layer of the Spirit Tempering realm. Chapter 830. Kacha. Amidst the deafening noise, the incomparably violent pillar of lightning struck one of the Wind Patrol beasts head-on. Its lower jaw was instantly pierced through by the pillar of lightning. Its bloody mouth exploded from the impact, blood and flesh splattering everywhere. Even its enormous body was thrown high into the air by the explosion, and it fell into the sea of trees with a muffled bang. After it landed, it twitched non-stop in the forest. Its entire body had been paralyzed by the lightning, and it couldn't move at all. Its entire mouth had been shattered, and half of its head had been charred black. Its body was on the brink of death, and its injuries were unbearable to look at. However, it was a spirit-refining realm exotic beast, after all. Even though its body had suffered such heavy injuries, its life wasn't in danger. Whoosh! After Ji Tianqing unleashed the pillar of lightning, he took the opportunity to escape from the crater and charged into the sky as quickly as he could. Almost at the same time as he escaped from the crater, the flames and white light released by the other 3 wind patrol beasts struck the crater hard. Bam! 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 An earth-shattering sound rang out, echoing in the air. The crater immediately expanded tenfold, reaching a radius of about 10 kilometers. He turned around and fled without looking back, bursting into the depths of the forest as fast as he could. In order to completely shake off the pursuit of the wind patrol beasts, he didn't hesitate to use his ultimate technique, sword kinesis flight. The sword embryo flew out from his abdomen and turned into a 3-meter-long golden sword, carrying him as he fled. Whoosh! In just a few dozen breaths' time, he shook off the wind patrol beasts and turned into a streak of golden light, disappearing into the horizon. The 3 wind patrol beasts were enraged. They let out earth-shattering roars and gave chase with all their might. Whoosh! 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 They also unleashed their greatest strength. Their bodies flickered with white light as they chased after Ji Tianqing. Their attention was only on Ji Tianqing. They only wanted to catch up to Ji Tianqing, blast him into pieces, and devour his flesh and blood. However, they didn't notice at all that there was a blurry figure chasing after them not far away. As time passed, Ji Tianqing and the 3 wind patrol beasts flew into the depths of the buried star sea. Their strength was constantly weakening. The 2 parties' pursuit in the buried star sea alarmed many powerful exotic beasts. Most of the exotic beasts were only watching from the shadows. They saw Ji Tianqing and the 3 wind patrol beasts streaking across the sky and disappearing into the distance. However, there were a few spirit-refining realm exotic beasts who joined the pursuit. Unknowingly, the 3 patrol winds had persevered in their pursuit for 4 hours. They chased after him. Ji of Ji Tianqing's trail. Of the wind patrol. Of Ji Tianqing. With Tianqing. In the end, the 3-headed patrolling storm let out a furious roar and gave up the chase. In order to vent their anger, they released destructive flames and spiritual light, turning the forest within a radius of 100 miles into ruins. Ji Tianqing ran madly for more than 3,000 miles, fleeing into the depths of the buried star sea. At this moment, he was covered in wounds. His white robe was stained with blood. He looked very miserable. Seeing that the sky behind him was calm and the wind patrol beasts were long gone, he heaved a sigh of relief. Phew, he heaved a sigh of relief and quickly descended from the sky. He landed on a 1,000-meter-tall mountain peak and panted heavily. He had been fighting fiercely with the wind patrol beasts and flying for 4 hours. His true essence had been consumed by 60 to 70%. He was like an arrow at the end of its flight. The physical pain was nothing, but the exhaustion of his body and soul made him unable to support himself. He just wanted to fall on the ground and sleep. He stood on the mountain peak and observed for a moment. Seeing that there was nowhere to hide, he used the Earth Emperor shield and entered the mountain peak. He dug a cave in the mountain peak and used it as a temporary shelter. He quickly took a few spirit pills and sat down to regulate his breathing. An hour passed unknowingly. He refined the medicinal efficacy of the spirit pills and used the Greenwood spiritual body to absorb the Greenwood spiritual chi between heaven and earth to quickly heal his injuries. He had already recovered 20% of his true essence. The exhaustion and pain in his body had lessened by a lot. The cave was silent. He concentrated on regulating his breathing, trying to recover his strength in the shortest time possible. After all, the buried star sea was extremely dangerous. Powerful strange beasts could jump out at any time. However, at this moment, a hazy figure silently passed through the rock layer and approached the cave. Swoosh! A light flashed and the air in the dark cave suddenly fluctuated. A tall and sturdy figure in a golden robe appeared in the narrow cave out of thin air. This handsome and resolute young man with a dignified aura and a pair of phoenix eyes was the third prince, Long Zitian. Ji Tianqing immediately sensed that something was wrong. He felt an extremely dangerous aura. He quickly stopped circulating and opened his eyes. He immediately saw a man in a golden robe standing 10 meters in front of him. Damn it! There is someone else in the buried star sea. Ji Tianqing was shocked. His face became serious and his eyes became gloomy. He didn't expect that there would be someone else in the buried star sea. Moreover, he had been fighting with the strange beasts. He had been in a life and death situation. He had almost exhausted all his strength and his vigilance had been greatly reduced. When he saw the man in the golden robe appear, he immediately realized that this man must have been watching him for a long time and had come with ill intentions. Although the man in the golden robe had restrained his aura, Ji Tianqing could vaguely feel that there was an invisible soul energy lingering around him. He was actually a soul refining stage powerhouse. Ji Tianqing immediately frowned and his pupils constricted. However, he didn't act rashly. He stared at the man in the golden robe and asked in a deep voice, "Who are you?" The third prince looked down at him from above. His eyes narrowed slightly as the corners of his mouth curled into a mocking sneer. Ji Tianqing, I didn't expect that our first meeting would be in the buried star sea. Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and asked coldly, "You know me?" The third prince laughed coldly. "Huh, I'd recognize you even if you turned into ashes." Ji Tianqing's expression didn't change, but he thought to himself, as expected. This guy has been watching me for a long time and has a deep grudge against me. Who is he? This person shouldn't be a demon in disguise. Could he be a surviving member of the Duanmu clan? Only a surviving member of the Duanmu clan would have such a deep grudge against me. Looks like it's most likely. Thinking of this, he stared at the third prince and asked in a deep voice, "Are you a surviving member of the Duanmu clan? Are you here to avenge the Duanmu clan?" The third prince was stunned. He grinned and said disdainfully, "A surviving member of the Duanmu clan? Huh, the Duanmu clan isn't worthy. Ji Tianqing, you've ruined my plans time and time again. You even cut off my right-hand man. You deserve to die." "You are, the third prince?" Ji Tianqing's body shook. He instantly guessed the third prince's identity. The third prince didn't deny it. He sneered and said, You actually dared to barge into the buried star sea and ended up in such a sorry state. How could I miss such a heaven-sent opportunity?" Chapter 831. The third prince's words made Ji Tianqing understand everything in an instant. At the same time, he recalled the scene the night before. The golden lightning tore through the night sky and headed straight for the imperial court of the human race. At that time, he was only thinking about treating his father's injuries and did not take that matter to heart. Now that he thought about it, he finally understood that the new soul-tempering stage powerhouse in the imperial court should be the third prince. If it were any other day, even if he met the third prince who had just entered the soul-tempering stage, he would be fearless and even have a chance to win. However, it was different now. He only had 50% of his vital core left and was covered in wounds. His combat strength had weakened a lot. However, the third prince was conserving his energy and his strength was at its peak state. Moreover, Ji Tianqing knew very well that the third prince also had a Gu Dao artifact, the source of all Gu. If they really fought, he would definitely not be the third prince's match. What should he do? Ji Tianqing was anxious and silently thought of a solution. The third prince did not intend to rush into action. He was still standing at the edge of the cave 10 meters away with a cold smile on his face. He looked confident and wise. "Ji Tianqing, I underestimated you before and didn't personally deal with you. That's why I allowed you to stir up trouble in the central continent. Now that you've been injured by a few strange beasts in the buried star sea, it's easy for me to kill you now. Ji Tianqing quietly recovered his strength and looked at the third prince coldly. He asked, since you're so confident, why don't you take action immediately? Ha! The third prince chuckled. His tone was cold and there was a hint of playfulness in it. I care about the world and have great ambitions. I'm not someone that idiot Long Yunxiao can compare to. Even though you've ruined my plans many times and made me hate you so much that I want to tear you into pieces. However, I'm destined to be the ruler of the world. I'm broad-minded. How can I not be tolerant? Wouldn't it be a pity if an outstanding talent like you, who hasn't been seen in hundreds of years, died silently? Hearing the third prince's words, Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and a cold light flashed in his eyes. What? You don't want to kill me anymore? Don't tell me, you want me to submit to you? That's right. The third prince sneered confidently. I am merciful and will give you a chance to live. If you know what's good for you, then obediently admit defeat and surrender. Kneel down and pledge your loyalty to me. Hearing this, Ji Tianqing suddenly laughed and asked in a playful tone, then you will plant a goo poison in me and control my life and death so that I can only listen to your orders. Huh, you have a good plan, but it's a pity that it's all a pipe dream. The third prince's expression changed slightly, and the smile on his face disappeared. He said in a cold voice, even though all geniuses have their own pride, you're just being stupid and stubborn. However, I had already expected that you wouldn't kneel down and surrender, so I had already made preparations. At this point, the third prince finally revealed his true appearance, revealing a sinister sneer. 20 breaths of time has passed. Have you noticed that your entire body is burning hot, your internal organs are stinging, and your blood is flowing faster? Ji Tianqing was startled for a moment. He lowered his head and looked at his arms and chest. Sure enough, his skin was dark red, as if blood was about to burst out. His entire body was boiling hot, and his internal organs felt as if they were being pricked by needles. His blood seemed to be boiling, surging and flowing, faintly emitting the sound of thunder. Even the blood vessels and meridians in his body were swelling, and his true essence was beginning to riot, losing control. Such an abnormal reaction immediately caused his expression to change, and his eyes emitted a cold light. This is goo poison. Long Zai Tian, you despicable person. Ji Tianqing was filled with anger, and his entire body was emitting a thick murderous intent. The sneer on the third prince's face became even more pronounced. He looked at Ji Tianqing with eyes full of contempt and pity. You've made such a big name in the central state, and stirred up a storm. I thought you had some great ability, and some outstanding wisdom. I didn't expect that you only had this little ability. You really disappoint me. As he spoke, the third prince slowly stretched out his left hand. A light flashed in his palm, and a 2 feet tall magic treasure appeared. This colorful, multicolored magic treasure was like a pyramid. Its design was simple and clumsy, and it was very exquisite and mysterious. This was an altar. It was the Gu Dao's divine weapon, the source of all Gu. Ji Tianqing's body trembled, his skin was red like fire, and sweat poured down like rain. But he gritted his teeth and endured the heart-wrenching pain. He didn't let out a scream, and his eyes stared at the third prince. Long Zai Tian, you're really sinister. You don't deserve to be a prince of the imperial court, and you don't deserve to fight for the throne. Your magnanimity is much worse than Long Yunxiao's. You will never be able to compete with Long Yunxiao in this lifetime. Ji Tianqing gritted his teeth and shouted in a low voice. His tone was sonorous and powerful, and there was already a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. Although he didn't fly into a rage, he didn't open his mouth to curse, and he didn't even curse. But he knew the third prince's weakness and the knot in his heart. With 2 sentences, the third prince was so angry that his face turned ashen, and his eyes surged with cold light. Bastard! The third prince cursed with a gloomy face. He shouted angrily in a low voice, "What right does Long Yun Shao have to compare with me? You and Long Yun Shao are jackals of the same tribe. You are also a useless piece of trash. In order to deal with you, I advanced step by step. I even used the altar and released the divine goo that I had prepared for a long time. Now it seems that I have overestimated you." The third prince held the Gu Dao's origin in his left hand, and his right hand was behind his back. He exuded a powerful aura, like a mighty monarch. There was no doubt that from the moment he entered the cave, he had secretly activated the Gu Dao's origin and started to use the Gu on Ji Tianqing. The reason why he talked so much nonsense with Ji Tianqing was that releasing the divine Gu into Ji Tianqing's body required a certain amount of time. Now, the time was up, and the divine Gu had entered Ji Tianqing's body. Of course, there was no need for him to pretend anymore. He immediately showed his true colors. "Ji Tianqing, I have cultivated and refined this divine Gu for 3 years. It is the same as the divine Gu in Duanmu Huang's body, and it is even more powerful. Even an expert like Duanmu Huang had to obey. What right do you have to resist? Kneel down." The third prince shouted angrily with a dignified voice, causing the entire cave to tremble. A trace of divine soul power gushed out from his palm, and he used a spell to activate the power of the Gu Dao's origin. The 5-colored altar started to operate slowly, and it gave off a dazzling 5-colored divine light, releasing an invisible mysterious power. The divine Gu in Ji Tianqing's body was instantly attracted and catalyzed, and it exploded with even more violent power. He could clearly feel that his internal organs, blood, flesh, and meridians were being devoured by the divine Gu's power, and they were slowly corroding and turning black. The heart-wrenching pain invaded his soul, and he was in so much pain that he wished he was dead. Blood was flowing out of his mouth and nose. But he still sat on the ground like a rock, and his body was as straight as a sword, giving off an indomitable aura. Chapter 832. The power of the divine venomous Gu was strange and unpredictable. Even the soul-refining realm expert, Duanmu Huang, had been controlled by the divine venomous Gu for many years. Of course, when the third prince used the origin of all venomous Gu on Duanmu Huang, he had planned carefully for 5 years. In these 5 years, not only did he have to find a chance to get close to Duanmu Huang, he also had to plant the venomous Gu without anyone noticing. After planting the divine venomous Gu, he had to use the god's altar to catalyze the divine venomous Gu and increase its power. After 5 years, he finally used the divine venomous Gu to completely control Duanmu Huang. Now that he had reached the soul-refining realm, he could use spells to control the origin of all venomous Gu. It was more convenient to use the venomous Gu without anyone noticing. But after all, he only used 20 breaths of time to plant the divine venomous Gu in Ji Tianqing's body. No matter how strong the divine venomous Gu was, it needed enough time to catalyze and grow. Therefore, the divine venomous Gu he planted in Ji Tianqing's body had not yet formed and had not been catalyzed to grow. He could not unleash the true power of the divine venomous Gu. What the third prince wanted to do was to intimidate Ji Tianqing psychologically and completely subdue him before completely controlling him. He had great confidence that in 3 months' time, he would be able to completely control Ji Tianqing's life and death and make Ji Tianqing his slave and puppet. Ji Tianqing, are you still resisting stubbornly? It's all futile. This seat cherishes talent. To be able to take a fancy to you, this is the good fortune of your 3 lifetimes. You are destined to become a dog under my command, a mad dog. Not only you, Cloud Spirit Palace will not be able to escape from my control. You will be a sharp blade for me to deal with Cloud Spirit Palace. Kneel down. The third prince's face was ferocious and his eyes shot out cold light. His voice was deep and powerful like thunder. He shouted angrily and activated the origin of all venomous Gu with all his might. He wanted to control the divine venomous goo's power and completely destroy Ji Tianqing's stubborn resistance. Ji Tianqing's skin instantly cracked and dark red blood seeped out, burning with dark red blood flames. It was as if his flesh and blood were burning. The divine venomous goo's power was actually so terrifying. Pfff, he finally couldn't withstand the erosion of the divine venomous insect. He opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. His vision turned black as he fell to the ground and fell unconscious. Trash that can't even withstand a single blow. I actually viewed you as a great enemy. How laughable. The third prince smiled disdainfully. With a flip of his left hand, he put away the origin of all poisonous beasts. He walked toward the unconscious Ji Tianqing and cast a spell to seal Ji Tianqing's power so that he could implant the divine venomous insect into his soul. This way, he would be able to completely control Ji Tianqing's life and death. Even if Ji Tianqing advanced to the soul refinement realm, he would still be unable to break free from the divine venom. However, just as he walked in front of Ji Tianqing and was about to use his secret technique, something unexpected happened. Ji Tianqing, who had been unconscious, suddenly woke up. With lightning speed, he erupted with an unparalleled power and fiercely blasted out a pitch-black light. That was not a martial technique, nor was it a light condensed by true core strength. It was a magic weapon. It was a pitch-black ancient bell that exuded a mysterious and cold aura. The Soul Reaper Bell. The third prince was caught off guard. He didn't expect that Ji Tianqing, who had been seriously injured and was vomiting blood and unconscious, would still be able to violently attack him. The Soul Reaper Bell burst with the most terrifying power. With a cold and deathly black light, it instantly blasted the third prince's chest. The third prince was blasted away and violently crashed into the cave wall. Bang! A deafening explosion burst out. The cave with a radius of more than 10 meters collapsed on the spot and shattered into pieces. Not only that, the third prince had also blasted through the cave wall that was hundreds of meters thick. He flew out of the cave and appeared in the sky above the forest outside the mountain. His chest had completely caved in. There was a basin-sized hole in his chest. More than 10 of his sternum were broken. Dark red blood gushed out and dyed his tattered golden dragon robe dark red. He looked extremely miserable. The wound was a mess of flesh and blood. Not only were the white bones exposed, but one could also clearly see the organs inside. In reality, the full-force attack of the Soul Reaper Bell had not only severely injured the third prince's physical body, it had also injured his soul and caused him to fall into a daze. He was sent flying for over 10 miles in the sky before he fell into the vast sea of trees. Bang! A huge crater was smashed into the dark green sea of trees. Dust flew up into the air, and a loud rumbling sound was heard. The third prince lay in the deep hole with disheveled hair. His entire body was covered in blood and dust. He looked extremely miserable. A moment ago, he was still in high spirits. He was like a monarch that ruled over the world. He held the pearl of wisdom in his hands and was domineering and majestic. The current him was like someone who had crawled out from a pile of corpses. He was so miserable that one couldn't bear to look at him directly. Such a huge difference caused him to be filled with rage. His entire face was twisted in anger. He struggled with all his might for a while before he staggered to his feet. He used his chi to shake off the dust on his body and suppress the injuries in his body. After all, he was a powerhouse of the soul refining stage. Even if his physical body was completely destroyed, he wouldn't die immediately. However, the shock and anger in his heart made him tremble. His eyes were filled with hatred. He raised his head to look at the sky and saw Ji Tianqing flying over at lightning speed. Why? This is impossible. Ji Tianqing, you bastard. You are so despicable. The third prince stared at Ji Tianqing furiously and roared in a hoarse voice. He couldn't believe that Ji Tianqing was in a coma and was at his mercy. How could he resist the power of the venomous insect and suddenly use his ultimate skill? He had great confidence in the power of the venomous insect and the venomous insect. The altar and the venomous insect were fine. The problem must be with Ji Tianqing. However, Ji Tianqing was only at the 7th level of the Sky Origin stage. How could he resist the venomous insect? The third prince was shocked, angry, and confused. He couldn't figure it out. Ji Tianqing stood in the sky and looked down at the third prince with a sneer on his face. His skin was as clear as jade and his breathing was very stable. He didn't look like he was poisoned by the venomous insect at all. Ha, Long Zitian, you are too arrogant and you underestimate me. Even the Duanmu clan, an ancient clan, was destroyed by me. In front of me, nothing is impossible. Ji Tianqing said proudly. His voice was full of confidence and arrogance. He stood proudly in the sky, holding the mysterious soul-reaping bell in his left hand. His eyes were shining with a sharp and cold light. When I used the soul control talisman to deal with the Duanmu Huang, I already knew about your background. I knew that you had a venomous insect artifact that could use the mysterious venomous insect. How could I not be prepared? You purposely delayed and secretly poisoned me. I beat you at your own game and put on a show with you. As for how I got rid of the venomous insect, I can't tell you. Wait until you're in the underworld, then you can slowly guess. After that, he poured his vigorous vital energy into the soul-reaping bell again. The soul-reaping bell emitted a cold light. Chapter 833. Ji Tianqing, you want to kill me? The third prince stood in the middle of the deep pit in the ruins. His face was cold as he angrily shouted. I am a prince of the imperial court and I have a soul tablet in the imperial court. If you kill me, the soul tablet will break and the imperial court will know that you are the murderer. Even if I die, you will be killed by the imperial court right away along with 9 generations of your clan. All of your loved ones will die. Ji Tianqing stood in the sky and looked down at him coldly. He sneered, what a joke. You are controlling the Duanmu clan and the Murong clan. How bold and ruthless you are. I thought you were an ambitious person, but I didn't expect you to be such an idiot. You want to threaten me with the imperial court before you die. Unfortunately, you are wrong. If I am afraid of the imperial court's punishment, I will not destroy the Duanmu clan. You want to take my life, so how can I forgive you? Not to mention that you're a prince of the imperial court, even if you're the emperor, I'll still kill you. Ji Tianqing shouted angrily with a dignified voice. His entire body was filled with a domineering aura. The third prince's face was still cold and he was not angry. He sneered and said, what shameless boasting. I have already reached the soul-refining realm. How can you kill me? Although he did not show it on the surface, he was stubbornly opposing Ji Tianqing. In fact, he was still stalling for time. He was secretly controlling the myriad Gu origin, silently accumulating strength to heal the injuries on his body. With the help of the Gu Dao divine artifact and the mysterious Gu art, the collapsed wound on his chest was healing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Even his soul injury was temporarily suppressed and stabilized by the myriad Gu origin. Ji Tianqing sensed that the third prince's injuries were healing. He narrowed his eyes and a cold light flashed in his eyes. You want to stall for time and heal your injuries? Dream on. As he said that, he used all his strength to activate the soul-reaping bell and smashed it at the third prince in the crater. The soul-reaping bell suddenly expanded 10,000 times and became a black ancient bell the size of a small mountain. It fell from the sky and smashed towards the third prince. The third prince was already prepared for this. He quickly took out the myriad Gu origin to defend himself. Gu origin. He flipped his palm, and a 5-colored altar appeared. As he controlled it with a spell, the altar immediately expanded 10,000 times and emitted a 5-colored light that covered the sky and released an invisible power. The mountain-like goo origin flew into the sky and collided with the soul-reaping bell with the power to kill everything. Boom! In that instant, a loud explosion shook the heavens, and everything within a radius of 200 miles was alarmed. The earth and the forest began to tremble, and the sky lit up with dazzling 5-colored brilliance, covering dozens of miles of heaven and earth. Destructive shockwaves spread out like ripples, sweeping across the world in all directions. Swoosh! Several mountain peaks within a radius of 100 miles were instantly razed to the ground, turning into yellow soil and ruins. Within 100 miles of the dense forest, hundreds of millions of towering trees were also crushed into powder and scattered among the ruins. The soul-reaping bell was a soul-level upper magic treasure, and the goo origin was a goo Dao divine artifact. Both magic treasures had the power to destroy heaven and earth. They were unbelievably powerful. In the blink of an eye, the area within a radius of 100 miles was destroyed, leaving behind a scene of devastation. The goo origin was unscathed. It shone with a brilliant 5-colored light and flew back to the third prince's palm. The soul-reaping bell was sent flying. It shone with a black light and fell into the ruins. There was no doubt that the soul-reaping bell's grade and power were inferior to the goo origin. It was no match for the goo origin. The figures of Ji Tianqing and the third prince were also drowned by the light. Both of them were sent flying by the terrifying shockwave. They spat out blood and fell into the ruins 10 miles away. However, the third prince's injuries were lighter. He struggled to get up from the ruins and flew back to the sky. Ji Tianqing's injuries were more serious. His face was pale, his hair was disheveled, and his white robe was tattered. He looked very miserable. Damn it! The goo origin is indeed a goo Dao artifact. Its power is so terrifying. It seems that the soul-reaping bell alone is not enough to kill Long Zai Tian. He cursed in his heart. He wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and flew back to the sky. The third prince stood in the sky 10 miles away. He stood tall and straight, holding the goo origin in his palm. His body was covered in a layer of 5-colored light. What surprised Ji Tianqing the most was that the third prince's injuries actually healed quickly. His chest had caved in before, and his bones were exposed. Now, he had recovered without any abnormalities. Ji Tianqing frowned, and his eyes became serious. The goo origin, this goo Dao artifact, has such a miraculous effect. Even if I have the ultimate sword body, Greenwood spiritual body, and Kenshin bloodline, I don't have such an abnormal recovery speed. At this time, the voice of the burial of heaven sounded in his mind. It said firmly, the goo Dao artifact naturally cannot heal people. It only uses the power of the evil goo Dao to temporarily heal his injuries. This kind of recovery is not natural. It goes against the way of heaven and is evil. It will not last long. Ji Tianqing finally understood the reason. He asked with concern, Burial of Heaven, how is your situation? Can you cure the divine goo? It won't harm you, right? There was no doubt that he had been poisoned by the divine goo. His body was burning with bloody flames as if he was going to explode and die. However, he somehow managed to neutralize the divine venomous insect as if nothing had happened. This was the credit of the burial of heaven. The burial of heaven had swallowed the divine goo in his body and transferred it to the Kenshin tomb. Hearing Ji Tianqing's concern, the burial of heaven said proudly, this level of goo Dao can't be called divine goo. It's not worth mentioning to me. If I recover my peak strength, I can break this kind of goo Dao with a flick of my finger. However, my strength is weak now. I can only slowly refine and remove the power of the goo Dao. I can't help you. Be careful. After that, the burial of heaven fell silent. Obviously, he was concentrating on dealing with the divine goo. Ji Tianqing knew what was going on, so he didn't ask anymore. At this time, the third prince sneered and shouted, "Ji Tianqing, didn't you say that you wanted to kill me? What do you think now? No matter how many trump cards you have, they are useless in front of me." The third prince shouted angrily. He waved his palms again and used the secret technique. He injected a vast amount of magic power into the origin of the goo. Suddenly, the origin of the goo turned into the size of a mountain. It floated high in the sky and emitted thousands of colorful lights. The heaven and earth within 100 miles were immediately covered by the colorful lights. A colorful light curtain that covered 100 miles was formed. It was like a huge colorful light ball that sealed the heaven and earth. Undoubtedly, this was a field. When the field was formed, the third prince shouted loudly, "Under the divine goo, all are ants." Chapter 834. The power of the venomous goo origin exploded, and the domain was formed instantly. The five-colored curtain of heaven and earth within 100 miles was controlled by the third prince. The venomous goo origin turned into a five-colored altar that was 100 meters tall. It floated at the highest point in the sky, emitting a five-colored brilliance. The third prince stood proudly on the altar. His face was full of arrogance as he looked down at Ji Tianqing. "Ji Tianqing, I am the absolute ruler of this 10,000 goo domain. Your life and death, and everything within 100 miles, are all under my control." As he spoke, he waved his sleeves and released an invisible force to control the entire 10,000 goo domain. Hundreds of millions of towering trees within a radius of 100 miles immediately collapsed and exploded, turning into endless powder. The powder of the trees, branches, and leaves condensed into hundreds of green dragons that were 1,000 meters long under the power of the domain. Swoosh! 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 Hundreds of giant azure dragons burst forth with destructive power and charged toward Ji Tianqing from all directions. They were about to kill him on the spot. This was the power of the domain. The third prince could gather the power of heaven and earth within 100 miles with just a thought and form a destructive spell. The flowers, trees, rocks, and earth in this world, even a drop of water and a wisp of air, were all under his control. In the blink of an eye, hundreds of green dragons swung their claws and fangs, drowning Ji Tianqing's figure. His figure was as small as a boat in the sea, and he was about to be smashed to pieces. But his expression did not change. His eyes were still calm and composed as he thought of a countermeasure. The power of the seal of mountains and rivers is almost exhausted. The soul-reaping bell has also been damaged after clashing with the venomous goo origin. Now my injuries are more serious, and I only have 40 to 50% of my true essence left. How can I escape? The next moment, hundreds of green dragons were about to hit him. At this critical moment, he recalled the scene when the clone of the Burial of Heaven fought with the two demon commanders. At that time, the clone of the Burial of Heaven was not strong enough and could not fight the two demon commanders head-on. It relied on its meticulous control of the battle situation to shuttle through the sky full of saber lights and sword shadows, dodging countless powerful attacks. Thus, Ji Tianqing imitated the Burial of Heaven's method and wanted to break through the encirclement of hundreds of green dragons at the smallest cost. Pure Heart Dharma I. He did not have the ability to control the battle like the Burial of Heaven, nor did he have the divine ability to analyze and predict the future, nor did he have the experience of millions of battles. However, he had used the White Heart Devil subduing art, and with the help of the White Heart Dharma I, he had obtained an extremely sharp observation ability. In the blink of an eye, he could clearly see the dozen or so green dragons charging at him, and he found a gap in their formation. Swoosh! His figure flashed, and he burst out with all his strength. He passed through the two giant green dragons with a mere 3 inches between them. Then he changed direction and passed between the 3 green dragons in between green dragons of heaven dragon and the dragon goo dragon immediately after, he passed through the encirclement of 4 green dragons. In a short moment, he actually broke through the encirclement of more than 20 green dragons. This was simply a miraculous miracle. When the third prince saw this scene, he was stunned on the spot and revealed a look of disbelief. He thought that his eyes were playing tricks on him. He actually saw Ji Tianqing get hit by the green dragons but pass through without a single injury. However, this was Ji Tianqing's first time trying to do this. His experience, speed, and reaction were still somewhat lacking. How could the encirclement of hundreds of green dragons be so easily dodged? Apart from the burial of heaven, no one could do it. Bang! 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 In the end, Ji Tianqing was still hit by a few green dragons and let out a deafening muffled sound. His figure was engulfed by the green light that filled the sky. He was sent tumbling backward and fell toward the ruins 10 miles away. Seeing this result, the third prince heaved a sigh of relief and thought to himself, "Despicable fellow, I really thought you could dodge this attack." Immediately after, Ji Tianqing fell from the sky and smashed onto the ground, letting out a muffled sound. Although he had smashed a deep hole in the ground and was lying at the bottom of the hole in a sorry state, his body was covered in dust and he looked very miserable. However, he was not angry. Instead, a smile hung on the corner of his mouth. Because his attempt just now had succeeded. Without a doubt, he had vaguely grasped the fighting method of the burial of heaven. Using the least amount of energy and paying the smallest price to resolve the enemy's powerful ultimate move, this was what a wise man would do. Especially when facing that kind of spell attack that could destroy heaven and earth, it was not advisable to face it head-on or blindly dodge it. Only by finding the flaws and loopholes of the spell's ultimate move and easily resolving it, this was what made the enemy feel the most despair. The burial of heaven is the soul of the godly sword. It has experienced at least 1,000,000 battles in its life and has faced all the peerless powerhouses. Its battle experience is incomparably rich, comparable to that of a godly state powerhouse. Its fighting method has already reached the level of turning complexity into simplicity and returning to simplicity. Using the simplest moves to cause the most direct and effective damage. It is indeed worthy of being the soul of the godly sword. Ji Tianqing thought to himself and admired the burial of heaven even more. Although his current strength was still very weak and he could not imitate the burial of heaven's fighting method. However, he could explore on his own and comprehend his own fighting method. And the third prince was the best candidate for the trial. At this moment, the third prince controlled the power of the realm again and released tens of thousands of 5-colored light swords. Like a rain of arrows, they fell from the sky and shot toward Ji Tianqing. Each 5-colored light sword was 10 meters long and the light was dazzling. The sword energy was sharp and contained a violent power. Pure Heart Dharma Eye. Ji Tianqing activated the power of the Pure Heart Dharma Eye, causing his pupils to turn golden and contain a mysterious power. He immediately saw the flying trajectories of the countless 5-colored light swords. His brain worked quickly and analyzed the best dodging route. When the overwhelming 5-colored light swords attacked, his figure flickered and shuttled back and forth in the sky full of sword light. As long as there was a gap between the two sword light, he could pass through it. When he encountered sword light that he could not dodge, he used his golden wings to block it. In this way, he shuttled back and forth in the sky full of sword light for a while. He used his wings to block dozens of light swords and neutralized the third prince's attack. When the tens of thousands of 5-colored giant swords dissipated, he appeared in the sky unscathed and looked at the third prince with a cold smile. The third prince's face changed on the spot. His face was ashen, and he narrowed his eyes and stared coldly at Ji Tianqing. He could not help but shout in a low voice, "Damn bastard, what kind of body movement is this? How can it be so strange?" Without a doubt, when the third prince saw Ji Tianqing's figure flickering and dodging the attacks of the sword light, he thought that he was using some kind of profound body movement. However, he could not think of any body movement that Ji Tianqing had practiced. Chapter 835. Martial artists below the soul-tempering stage would practice some footwork and movement techniques to assist in battle. However, Ji Tianqing had only practiced the shadowless steps, and he had practiced it a long time ago. Ever since he reached the sky origin stage, he had never used it again. Although the combat technique he had just come up with was simple and crude, it was much better than the shadowless steps. I learned this combat technique from the burial of heaven. Since that is the case, I will name it Sword Soul Combat Technique. Although I am still at the stage of learning, and the Sword Soul Combat Technique is only in its infancy, I will continue to practice it. However, if I continue to train and try, I will definitely be able to perfect the Sword Soul Battle Technique and make it my own battle technique. These thoughts flashed through Ji Tianqing's mind as he decided on a name for his combat technique. He raised his head and looked at the third prince, who was standing proudly on the altar. He sneered and said, "Third prince, your so-called 10,000 gu realm is just as so. So what if you can control the power of heaven and earth? You can't do anything to me, can you? You must be very angry that your 2 attacks missed, right?" The third prince was very angry. He was burning with anger, and his face was as cold as ice. He looked down at Ji Tianqing and shouted coldly, "Ji Tianqing, that was just the appetizer. Now, I will show you the true power of the 10,000 gu realm. I will let you be proud for a while. Soon, I will make you cry." As he finished speaking, he waved his hands and used a spell to control the power of the 10,000 gu origin. Suddenly, the colorful altar, which was hundreds of meters tall, released thousands of blue flames. They poured down like rain from the sky. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. At least 8 million dark blue flames poured down like raindrops, enveloping the sky within 100 miles. Each blue flame was only the size of a palm. They quickly condensed into a thumb-sized blue beetle and flew toward Ji Tianqing. Although the beetle was small, it looked ferocious. Their bodies were like locusts, but their tails were like scorpions, and their bodies were covered with sharp spikes. The scariest thing was that the beetle's head looked like a ghost's face, and it had 4 white fangs. "I'll let you have a taste of the power of Yin Ghost Gu." The third prince waved his sleeves and roared with a ferocious expression. Suddenly, the blue beetles that blotted out the sky and covered the earth rushed towards Ji Tianqing like a swarm of locusts. Every Yin Ghost Gu carried an eerie aura of death, as if they were malicious ghosts from the netherworld. Their speed was as fast as light. Their ghastly faces were ghastly as they opened their mouths full of sharp teeth, wanting to bite Ji Tianqing's flesh and soul. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing's expression changed and he cursed, "Despicable." There were too many Yin Ghost Gu, they were densely packed and covered the sky, making it impossible for him to dodge. The Sword Soul battle technique that he had just created had also lost its usefulness. Buzz 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 buzz. In the blink of an eye, the dark ghost Gu that descended from the sky engulfed his figure. He subconsciously activated his primeval essence and condensed an Earth Emperor shield, bursting out with thousands of sword chi, shooting in all directions. Swish swish swish. Thousands of chopstick-length golden sword chi burst out with unparalleled sharpness, stabbing into the surrounding Yin Ghost Gu. Those Yin Ghost Gu screeched as they were hit by the sword chi, and were sent flying back. However, their dark blue carapaces had extremely strong defensive power, blocking the sword chi's power. After flying 1,000 meters away, they flew back without any injuries, and charged towards Ji Tianqing even more crazily. Boom boom boom. Tens of thousands of Yin Ghost Gu charged towards Ji Tianqing without fear of death, crashing into the dark yellow Earth Emperor shield and letting out a series of muffled sounds. The Earth Emperor shield with extremely strong defensive power could not withstand the continuous attacks of countless Yin Ghost Gu, and cracks started to appear on it. Immediately after, those Yin Ghost Gu were like maggots, wrapping around Ji Tianqing's body and crazily biting the Earth Emperor shield. Kacha kacha. Following a crisp cracking sound, the Earth Emperor shield was bitten full of holes in a blink of an eye. Heavens, what the hell is this? Even the Earth Emperor's shield cannot block it. Ji Tianqing's heart was filled with shock and helplessness, and he let out a furious shout. Relying on his own strength and secret techniques, he could not deal with the mysterious Yin Ghost Gu. Helplessly, he could only summon the soul-reaping bell, activating the mysterious and cold black light, bursting out in all directions. Boom! The bone-chilling black light of death exploded, enveloping the surrounding thousands of meters. At least hundreds of thousands of Yin Ghost Gu were blasted away, turning into a dark blue wave, sweeping across the sky. Ji Tianqing finally let out a sigh of relief, and quickly kept the soul-reaping bell, summoning the magic treasure mountain river seal, and entering the magic treasure space. 2 breaths later, a scene that made him dumbstruck appeared. Those hundreds of thousands of Yin Ghost Gu that were blasted away actually flew back unharmed, and charged towards him even more crazily. Damn it! Not only are these Yin Ghost Gu indestructible, even the soul-reaping bell is ineffective against them. Could it be that they cannot be killed? High up in the sky, the third prince who was standing at the top of the altar sneered in disdain. Ha 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 ha, fool, Yin Ghost Gu are mysterious and unfathomable Gu. They do not have souls, what is the use of your soul attack? In my myriad Gu domain, they are undying, there is no end to them. Ji Tianqing, give up resisting. My 8 million Yin Ghost Gu are enough to devour all of your magic treasures. Even your flesh and soul will become a midnight snack for the Yin Ghost Gu. In the blink of an eye, over 1 million Yin Ghost Gu surrounded the mountain river seal, completely covering the golden light of the seal. The dense and endless dark Ghost Gu wrapped the mountain river seal into a huge blue ball that was the size of a hill. Every Yin Ghost Gu released dark blue flames, burning the mountain river seal, and opened their mouths to bite the seal with all their might. Ji Tianqing was in the treasure space inside the mountain river seal, and could clearly hear creaking sounds coming from the surface of the mountain river seal. In a short while, the layer of golden light on the surface of the mountain river seal was devoured. Immediately after, the indestructible mountain river seal dimmed under the corrosion of the dark blue flames, and gradually turned black. In fact, the frenzied biting of over 1 million Yin Ghost Gu left densely packed dents on the surface of the mountain river seal. Looking at the current situation, in at most an hour, the mountain river seal would be turned into a pile of scrap metal by the Yin Ghost Gu. Ji Tianqing was immediately filled with anxiety, his heart burning with worry. Right at this moment, a series of muffled rumbling sounds came from nowhere and reverberated endlessly in the heavens and the earth. Ji Tianqing was stunned, and so was the third prince on the altar. The two looked at the edge of the myriad Gu domain, and immediately saw that the 5-colored light screen that covered the sky was shaking intensely. Chapter 836. The sudden change stunned Ji Tianqing and the third prince. The two stared at the edge of the myriad Gu domain, watching as the 5-colored light barrier crumbled bit by bit, countless cracks appeared on it. A few moments later, along with a series of loud bangs, angry roars of beasts could be heard. They seemed to have guessed something, and their expressions changed. Oh no! Our fight caused too much of a commotion and attracted the ancient mutated beasts. Hiding in the seal of mountains and rivers, Ji Tianqing pondered with a grave expression. The ancient mutated beasts suddenly appeared and were about to break the 10,000 Gu domain, giving him a chance to escape. However, he knew that there was more than one ancient mutated beast outside the domain, and they were all at the soul refining realm. Even if he escaped the 10,000 Gu domain and got rid of the Yin Ghost Gu, he would still be killed by a group of ancient mutated beasts. Damn it! I forgot that ancient mutated beasts are everywhere in the buried star sea. The third prince's expression was the worst. He clenched his fists, and his heart was filled with anger and indignation. He had finally caught the opportunity to trap Ji Tianqing in the 10,000 Gu domain, and was about to torture him to death. However, just as he was about to succeed, a few ancient mutated beasts suddenly appeared and interfered. How could he not be angry? Bang! 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 The loud noises continued to sound, and became more and more rapid. The five-colored light screen shook more and more violently, and the cracks became bigger and bigger. Finally, with an earth-shattering boom, the five-colored sky in the southeast was instantly smashed into pieces, and a huge hole appeared in the sky. The huge hole was dozens of meters wide, and countless cracks appeared around it, and light shards flew everywhere. Immediately after, a black beast that was as large as a mountain and looked like a giant ape passed through the hole and entered the 10,000 gu domain. This was an ancient mutated beast that was 100 meters tall and as large as a mountain. It had a rough and violent appearance. It had 4 extremely thick limbs and a pair of dark red wings on its back, surrounded by dark red heavenly fire. A pair of dark red eyes that were as large as water tanks, like fiery red gems, contained a domineering majesty that looked down upon all living beings. Its entire body was covered in firm and bulging muscles that were as tough as magic treasures, and it was filled with a violent force that could destroy the world. The most terrifying thing was that Ji Tianqing and the third prince could clearly sense that the strength of this sky tyrant ape was 10 times greater than theirs. It was at least at the 6th level of the soul refinement stage. It was this terrifyingly powerful tyrant sky ape that had blasted open the myriad gu domain. One of them had just reached the soul refinement realm, while the other had not. In front of the sky tyrant ape, they were as weak as chickens, unable to withstand a single blow. Moreover, the sky tyrant ape wasn't moving alone. It was leading 6 ancient mutant beasts at the soul refinement realm. The 6 ancient mutant beasts had different appearances. Some looked like walking beasts, some looked like flying birds, and one of them was actually a 1,000-meter-long giant snake. They attacked the myriad gu domain crazily, tearing open that huge hole and shattering the entire 5-colored canopy. Along with a series of cracking sounds, the 5-colored sky barrier that enveloped an area of 50 kilometers in radius was shattered in an instant and gradually collapsed. The third prince's expression was as cold as ice, and his eyes were filled with anger. Fortunately, he had used the power of the myriad gu origin to unleash the myriad gu domain. Thus, after the domain was shattered, he did not suffer a backlash. At this moment, the sky tyrant ape's figure flashed and flew into the sky, arriving at the center of the domain. Roar! Its eyes were fixed on the huge blue ball floating in the sky. When it saw the millions of ghost gu, it immediately let out a furious roar. It actually opened its bloody mouth and spat out dark red heavenly flames, which covered the entire blue ball. Boom! The extremely powerful heavenly fire sent the blue ball flying, crashing into the ruins tens of miles away. More than half of the million ghost gu surrounding the mountain river seal were burned to death by the dark red heavenly fire, turning into wisps of blue light and dissipating. The ghost gu that were lucky enough to survive all fled in panic, flying towards the 5-colored altar in the sky like a swarm of bees returning to their nest. When the myriad gu domain was around, they were naturally indestructible and almost undying. But after the domain was shattered, they lost the support of the domain's power and became much weaker. The heavenly fire with terrifying might engulfed the entire sky, burning those ghost gu that were fleeing in panic into pieces. Next, the sky tyrant ape looked in the direction of the ghost gu that were fleeing in the sky, looking at the 5-colored altar in the sky and the third prince who was at the top of the altar. Roar! It let out another roar and charged into the sky, waving its huge fists and smashing them towards the 5-colored altar. Its fists were as big as houses, wrapped in a layer of dark red heavenly fire, containing the power to destroy heaven and earth. Moreover, its speed was extremely fast, the third prince had no time to resist or counterattack. Seeing the sky tyrant ape charging towards him, his expression changed and he wanted to escape on the 5-colored altar. Unfortunately, he was too slow. Bam bam! With an earth-shattering sound, the sky tyrant ape's fists landed on the 5-colored altar, sending the altar and the third prince flying. Whoosh! The 100-meter-tall 5-colored altar was sent flying over 30 miles, shining with 5-colored light, and its aura was chaotic. Fortunately, the 5-colored altar was a Gu Path divine artifact after all. It was undamaged after receiving the Sky Tyrant Ape's direct attack. Although the third prince was not hit by the Sky Tyrant Ape, he was still injured, his face was pale and he vomited blood. This Sky Tyrant Ape's strength is definitely at the 6th level of the spirit refinement realm. It must be the leader of the nearby ancient mutated beasts. As soon as this thought flashed through his mind, he immediately entered the 5-colored altar and drove it away without looking back. At this moment it was more important to stay alive. He did not have time to deal with Ji Tianqing. Under his control, the 5-colored altar quickly shrunk to a size of 10 meters, spewing out 5-colored flames and bursting out with unparalleled speed, like a meteor streaking across the horizon. Roar, roar! The Sky Tyrant Ape did not want to let him go so easily. After roaring into the sky, it immediately turned into a stream of flame and started to chase after him. At the same time, in the ruins dozens of miles away, a figure suddenly appeared. It was Ji Tianqing. The power of the seal of mountains and rivers was completely depleted. Its surface was filled with dents and was slightly damaged. Ji Tianqing kept the seal of mountains and rivers and was about to fly into the sky to search for the Sky Tyrant Ape and the third prince. At this moment, 6 ancient mutated beasts of the spirit refinement realm discovered him. They roared and pounced, wanting to kill him. Chapter 837. Ji Tianqing had already witnessed the prowess of the ancient beasts. The wind patrol beasts from before had put him in a difficult position, and he had almost died at the hands of the third prince. Now, the 6 ancient beasts following the domineering Sky Ape not only outnumbered them, but they were also more powerful than the wind patrol beasts. Therefore, he had no intention of fighting them. He turned around and fled without hesitation. He fled with all his might, and the further the better. He had almost exhausted all his energy, and his Dharma treasures were damaged to varying degrees. He was truly at the end of his rope. Once he was caught by the 6 ancient beasts, death was the only outcome. There was no chance of survival. Moreover, in order to avoid the domineering Sky Ape and the third prince, he chose another direction and fled with all his might. Swoosh! He rode on his golden sword and streaked across the sky like a golden shooting star. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The 6 ferocious ancient beasts chased after him with all their might. They also burst forth with their fastest speed and followed closely behind him. Ji Tianqing only had about 30% of his true core left. He was truly exhausted. However, he did not dare to relax. His nerves were taut as he flew without regard for anything else. As time passed, his true core was quickly depleted. His body was extremely tired, and his mind was in a trance. His vision was also becoming blurry. However, the 6 ancient beasts did not give up on the chase. They looked like they would not stop until they killed him. Damned beasts! We have no enmity between us. Why do you have to chase me so relentlessly and kill me? Ji Tianqing was filled with grief, anger, and helplessness. He could not help but curse. Fortunately, his desire to live had allowed him to explode with energy, and his sword kinesis flight was faster than usual. An hour later, he had shaken off 3 of the 6 ancient beasts. 2 hours later, he had shaken off all 5 ancient beasts. They were completely out of sight. There was only one giant golden bird left. It was still in hot pursuit, and the distance between them was constantly closing. After all, Ji Tianqing's energy was extremely weak, and his sword kinesis flight was getting slower and slower. He hesitated for a moment before taking out a light red elixir from his interspatial ring. This elixir was called the explosive blood elixir. Yun Zhongqi had prepared it for him, and it was meant to be used in moments of life and death. After consuming this explosive blood elixir, it could burn the essence of one's flesh for 15 minutes, stimulating the deepest potential of one's body and increasing his strength. Of course, the explosive blood elixir was forbidden. It should not be used casually. Once the user's body's blood elixir was used, and his body would fall into an extremely weak state. He would need a long time to recover. Seriously, he could be unconscious for 10 days to half a month. When Yun Zhongqi had given the blood burst pill to Ji Tianqing, he had solemnly warned him not to use it unless it was absolutely necessary, and the his s's blood s. Suddenly, the explosive blood pill turned into a dark red stream of energy that spread through his body and quickly spread to his limbs and bones. The violent and powerful medicinal effect immediately filled his flesh and blood and started to burn his refined flesh and blood energy. His body turned red and hot. He was sweating profusely, but his sweat was evaporated into mist. The burning of his flesh and blood made him suffer a heart-wrenching pain. But he gritted his teeth and did not make a sound. Soon, the burning of his flesh and blood turned into a violent and vigorous true essence, surging wildly in his body. His aura suddenly became violent, and his strength doubled. Swoosh! The golden sword under his feet shone with a blinding golden light, and his speed doubled. In the blink of an eye, Ji Tianqing had pulled away from the flying beast. Moreover, as time passed, the distance between them kept widening. No matter how hard the flying beast chased, it could not catch up to him. Finally, a quarter of an hour had passed, and the strange flying bird was finally shaken off without a trace. Ji Tianqing finally let out a sigh of relief, as if a heavy burden had been lifted off his shoulders. Great, I finally got rid of them. As he thought of this, he felt a tingling sensation all over his body. Every muscle and every nerve in his body became stiff and uncontrollable. Incomparable exhaustion hit him. His body withered, his qi and blood withered, and his eyes darkened. Without a doubt, the explosive blood pill was about to wear off, and the side effects were about to erupt. No. I can't faint yet. I have to find a safe place to stop. Ji Tianqing gritted his teeth and forced himself not to faint with his strong willpower. He hurriedly looked around, looking for a suitable place to hide. However, when he looked around, he found that he had chosen the direction of escape in his panic. Although the ground was still covered in dense forests, and there were many undulating mountain ranges around him, he did not know how far he had escaped, nor where he was. What was more terrifying was that he had lost his sense of direction. His mind was in a daze, and he could not even tell north from south. He fixed his gaze in front of him and saw a hazy and dazzling multicolored light. It was early in the morning. Dawn was about to arrive, and the world was dark. However, 5 kilometers in front of him, the dense forest had disappeared, and it was replaced by a dark, gray wasteland. The night sky was dark, but in the depths of the vast, boundless wasteland, there was a majestic ancient city, which was emitting a dazzling light. The Dead Star Sea was full of forests. How could there be a wasteland? And it was a gray, colorless wasteland. In the wasteland, there was a majestic, ancient city. The ancient city was emitting a hazy light, which could illuminate half the sky. This scene was simply too bizarre. Damn it, I must be seeing things. This thought flashed through Ji Tianqing's mind. His consciousness immediately became blurry, and his eyes slowly closed. He had completely overdrawn his strength. As the side effects of the explosive blood pill broke out, he fainted on the spot. Then, the golden sword became dim, shrank to the size of a thumb, and went back into his body. He fell from the sky, drawing a sorry arc in the air, and fell straight into the dark and gloomy wasteland. Bam! Ji Tianqing fell hard on the barren wasteland, creating a deep pit in the ground. Dust flew up, and a dull, loud sound was heard. Fortunately, although he had fainted, his body was the ultimate sword body, which had been tempered thousands of times. Even if he fell from the sky, he was not injured. Unfortunately, he was lying unconscious in the deep pit, not moving at all. He had completely lost consciousness. In this mysterious, dangerous, and deadly dead star sea, he, who was unconscious, was like a fish on a chopping board, waiting to be slaughtered. Chapter 838. 2 hours passed quickly. A new day had arrived. The sky was getting brighter, but it was still gloomy. At the edge of the gray wilderness, Ji Tianqing was still lying in the deep pit, motionless and unconscious. Half of his body was covered in mud. His clothes were ragged, and his body was covered in blood. He looked extremely miserable. At this moment, in the dense forest not far away, there was a rustling sound of branches and leaves. It seemed that there was a giant beast moving through the forest. Wherever it went, the towering trees would shake, and the leaves would part to the sides. There was no doubt that the smell of blood on Ji Tianqing's body had attracted some demonic beasts or beasts. After a short while, a 10-meter-long demonic beast with colorful patterns all over its body crawled out of the forest. It was a demonic beast with a mediocre bloodline. It looked like a tiger, but it also looked like a combination of a lion and a leopard. It didn't look alike at all. It probably had the bloodline of some ancient beasts, so its aura was very fierce. Its strength was also at Sky Origin Stage Level 3. If it was outside the buried star sea, this demonic beast would be a demonic king, which could dominate a region. If Ji Tianqing encountered this demonic king, he would be able to kill this demonic king with one strike. However, it was different now. Ji Tianqing was lying in the deep pit, motionless and unconscious. The demonic beast stopped at the edge of the forest. It stared at Ji Tianqing from dozens of meters away, saliva dripping from its bloody mouth. Obviously, it thought Ji Tianqing was its delicious breakfast. Its scarlet eyes were filled with a strong desire. It really wanted to rush into the gloomy wasteland, grab Ji Tianqing, and eat to its heart's content. However, it stopped at the edge of the forest, staring at the gray wilderness. It seemed to be hesitant and afraid. No one knew what it was hesitating about. 15 minutes passed. The demonic beast was attracted by the smell of blood on Ji Tianqing's body. It didn't want to leave. Not only that, it also had a strong thirst for blood. It only wanted to swallow Ji Tianqing into its stomach to replenish its vitality and strength. Perhaps it was because the wilderness was too peaceful and deathly still that there were no abnormal sounds. The desire to devour food gradually overcame the fear in its heart. It finally extended its claws and stepped on the gray wasteland tentatively. It's fine. Nothing happened. As a result, the multicolored demonic beast became bolder, and its other claws also stepped onto the wasteland. It was still safe and sound. The wilderness was still dark and deathly silent. The fear in the multicolored demonic beast's heart gradually dissipated. It began to walk toward the deep pit, and its speed became faster and faster. Obviously, it had made up its mind to capture Ji Tianqing in the deep pit and return to its nest to have a good meal. Ji Tianqing was still lying motionless in the pit, unable to feel the approach of death. The multicolored demonic beast was getting closer and closer to the deep pit. Finally, the 100 treasures brocade pouch on Ji Tianqing's waist opened with a swish. An ice-blue furry ice fox crawled out of the 100 treasures brocade pouch. It was Qian Yu. Old Ji. Wake up, old Ji. When it saw Ji Tianqing lying unconscious in the pit and the multicolored demonic beast rushing toward it, it immediately called out anxiously. However, Ji Tianqing did not respond. Qian Yu hesitated for a moment before it made up its mind. Its body expanded to more than 5 meters long. It's too late. I can't care so much. Saving my life is more important. It muttered to itself and quickly reached out its claws to grab Ji Tianqing. It jumped out of the deep pit with him and ran toward the depths of the wilderness at an extremely fast speed. Roar! The multicolored demonic beast had just reached the edge of the deep pit and was about to catch its prey when the cooked duck flew away. It immediately roared angrily and stared at Qian Yu with its scarlet eyes. Without hesitation, it jumped across the deep pit and chased after Qian Yu. Qian Yu was anxious. It quickly flapped its wings and ran with all its might to avoid the multicolored demonic beast's attack. However, its strength was only at the primordial core stage after all. It was much weaker than the multicolored demonic beast. In a short while, the multicolored demonic beast caught up with it. When the two were only 20 meters apart, the multicolored demonic beast jumped into the sky with all its might and pounced on Qian Yu with a roar. Roar! Qian Yu desperately used all its strength and its speed suddenly doubled. It narrowly avoided the multicolored demonic beast's attack. The sharp claws of the multicolored demonic beast almost brushed past its furry tail and tore off a handful of its ice blue fur. Ah! You damned ugly freak, you will be struck by lightning. Qian Yu cursed angrily as a tuft of her beloved tail was scratched off. It seemed that its curse had taken effect or that some mysterious force had suddenly appeared. Swoosh! When the multicolored demonic beast pounced on it again, a ray of white light appeared out of thin air in the dark sky. That ray of white light was like a thunderclap on a summer night. It was also like a long and narrow sword. It instantly tore through the dark sky and slashed across the multicolored demonic beast's body. The multicolored demonic beast's huge body was instantly cut in half. It fell straight from the sky and blood splattered all over the sky. Plop! With a muffled sound, the two halves of the multicolored demonic beast's corpse fell on the wasteland with a muffled sound. Although its corpse was still twitching and its limbs were still trembling, it was already dead. Seeing this scene, Qian Yu was instantly stunned and forgot to fly away. Ah! Oh my God! Is my curse really that effective? Qian Yu was a little dumbfounded. It stared blankly at the multicolored demonic beast's corpse and a strong sense of fear rose in its heart. This was because it understood that the mysterious white light must be some mysterious force and was definitely not its curse. If that mysterious force could kill the multicolored demonic beast, of course, it could also kill it. At this moment, the two halves of the demonic beast's corpse on the ground were enveloped by the mysterious white light and quickly dissolved into gray powder. Qian Yu saw the multicolored demonic beast's corpse turn into powder with its own eyes and immediately screamed in fright. It fled back into the 100 treasures brocade pouch in a panic. Oh my God, what the hell is this place? It's too creepy, too scary. Qian Yu hid in the 100 treasures brocade pouch and muttered with fear. It only felt that the dark wasteland was very eerie. Oh right, old Ji. Only then did it come to its senses and remember Ji Tianqing. The pitiful Ji Tianqing once again fell from the sky and landed solidly on the wasteland. He lay motionless on the ground. His body was covered in dust and he was still unconscious. Although Qian Yu was worried about his safety, it was afraid of the mysterious white light and did not dare to come out of the 100 treasures brocade pouch again. Fortunately, the wasteland was quiet and there were no more white lights or strange situations. Ji Tianqing was also safe and sound. Time passed silently. Unknowingly, 8 hours had passed. Ji Tianqing, who was in a coma, finally woke up and slowly opened his eyes. Chapter 839. When Ji Tianqing woke up, the sky was already bright. He frowned at the soreness and numbness all over his body. He was extremely weak. He struggled a few times before he got up from the ground. He did not even have the energy to care about the dust on his body. He checked his body and found that there was not a single drop of true essence left in his body. He was like an ordinary person who had never cultivated before. He had no skills, and his body was extremely weak. In this mysterious, dangerous, and strange wasteland, this was extremely dangerous. I didn't expect the side effects of the blood-burst pill to be so strong. Luckily, I escaped and did not die here. As long as he was still alive, there was still hope. He rubbed his somewhat blurry eyes and looked around to size up his surroundings. Beneath his feet was a gray and colorless wasteland. There was not a single blade of grass, and it was covered with gray soil and gravel. 10 miles behind him was a dense and deep forest. The wasteland was silent. There were no living creatures, and there was no spirit chi of heaven and earth. This wasteland was like a forbidden zone for life. It also seemed to have been sealed by some mysterious power. All spirit chi of heaven and earth was isolated. Ji Tianqing's ultimate sword body would naturally absorb spirit chi of heaven and earth to replenish his strength. His greenwood spiritual body would also automatically absorb the greenwood spiritual chi to heal his injuries. However, this was useless. There was no spirit chi of heaven and earth in the wasteland. If he wanted to recover his true essence and heal his injuries, he could only leave the wasteland and return to the dense forest. However, he was extremely weak now. He staggered as he walked. If he wanted to leave the wasteland, he would have to walk 10 miles. It was too difficult. Thus, Ji Tianqing sat cross-legged on the ground. He took out a few pills from his spatial ring and consumed them. He circulated his energy to refine the pills and recover his true essence and heal his injuries. The pills that Yun Zhongqi had prepared for him were the best pills in Cloud Spirit Palace. They were extremely effective. As the pills' effects exploded, his injuries began to heal quickly. His true essence was also recovering quickly. However, 6 hours had passed. The pills' effects had been completely used up. His injuries and true essence had only recovered by 20%. His injuries were too severe. His true essence had been completely used up. Counting on a few spirit pills to restore his injuries and true essence was simply a drop in the bucket. If it were any other time, Ji Tianqing would not be in a hurry. He would just sit there and meditate for 3 to 5 days, and his Jin Yuan and injuries would slowly recover. However, his father only had 3 days left to live. Time was of the essence. He was a little anxious. He frowned and thought about what he could do to help him recover his strength quickly. Relying on elixirs wouldn't work. No matter how many elixirs he took, he would still have to meditate for a day or two before he could completely digest the medicinal power. Thus, he rummaged through his spatial ring to see if he could find another way. Suddenly, his gaze landed on a dark green ball of light in the depths of the spatial ring. Within the ball of dark green light was a small green tree that was over a foot tall. It looked like a sapling, but it was actually lush with branches and leaves. Its trunk was thick and strong, and it contained an ancient aura. Without a doubt, this small tree was Duanmu Huang's treasure, the famous green light treasure tree. On the night that Ji Tianqing killed his way into Duanmu Huang's residence, he had fought fiercely with Duanmu Huang for over 100 moves. In the end, he had completely killed Duanmu Huang. After Duanmu Huang's death, the green light treasure tree became an ownerless object and fell into the ruins. Ji Tianqing had already seen the power of the green light treasure tree. He also knew that this treasure could gather greenwood spirit chi and grow all flowers and trees. It was also a peerless treasure for healing and saving people. Of course, he would not let go of this top-notch treasure. Before leaving the battlefield, he had secretly taken the green light treasure tree away. At that time, the green light treasure tree's power was almost exhausted and could no longer be used. Thus, he threw the green light treasure tree into his spatial ring and let it slowly recover its strength. More than a month had passed, and he had almost forgotten about the existence of this treasure. Now, when he saw the green light treasure tree again, he found that it had already recovered 80 to 90% of its power. This is great. I can borrow the power of the green light treasure tree to heal my injuries and recover my primordial chi. His heart was filled with joy as he quickly took out the green light treasure tree. Swoosh! The green light treasure tree was held in the palm of his hand, releasing a rich dark green light and emitting an incomparably rich green with spirit chi and vitality. He began to cultivate and absorb the power of the green light treasure tree to heal his injuries and replenish his depleted primordial chi. The green light treasure tree slowly rotated and released dozens of dark green streams of air into his body, enveloping him in a green light. As time passed, his primordial chi quickly recovered, and the injuries all over his body healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. Such a fast recovery speed was several times faster than when he used elixirs and miraculous medicines. After all, the green light treasure tree was very effective. He also had the greenwood spirit body, so he could absorb the power of the green light treasure tree very quickly. In just a short 8 hours, his injuries were more than half healed, and he was basically fine. His true essence had also been completely restored, and his entire person had become full of vigor and vigor. What a miraculous treasure tree! It can catalyze the growth of trees and grass, and it is also a treasure for healing injuries and recovering primordial chi. Ji Tianqing was full of joy as he praised and quickly put away the green light treasure tree. He finished cultivating and stood up to look around, thinking about his next plan. I remember that before I fainted, I seemed to see a sky full of light in the depths of the wilderness, and there seemed to be a majestic ancient city. He thought about the scene he saw before he fainted, and his heart was full of doubts. He raised his eyes to look at the scene in the depths of the wilderness. However, the wilderness was vast and boundless, and there seemed to be no end to it. The depths of the wilderness were also flat, showing a gray scene. There was no light at all, and there was no ancient city. In the sea of trees, other than the endless demonic beasts and ancient beasts, there seems to be no clues related to the heaven-mending pearl. However, this wilderness is very strange, and it seems to contain some secrets. Ji Tianqing frowned and thought. After a moment of consideration, he decided to explore the depths of the wilderness. He flapped his wings and flew into the sky, advancing towards the depths of the wilderness as fast as lightning. At this time, Qian Yu saw that he had recovered his strength, and communicated with him through spiritual sense. "Old Ji, you're finally okay. You scared me to death before." Ji Tianqing chatted with it as he flew. "What's wrong? What happened before?" Qian Yu said with lingering fear, "Old Ji, that incident was too scary. This wasteland was very strange. At that time, you were lying unconscious on the ground, and there was a demonic beast at the demonic king level that wanted to eat you." Qian Yu then recounted the events that had transpired before. After Ji Tianqing heard it, he was also full of shock and confusion, and became more and more curious about this mysterious and strange wilderness. He had a vague premonition that there must be some secret hidden in this desolate wasteland. It was very likely that it was related to the ancient legend. Chapter 840. Things were just as Ji Tianqing thought. The wasteland was vast and boundless, as if it would never end. He flew continuously for 6 hours, but the wasteland under his feet was still flat, gray and colorless, with not even a blade of grass growing. As far as the eye could see, the heavens and earth were boundless, and there was nothing that could attract his attention. He looked down at the wasteland, his eyes unfocused, unable to find any clues. If he had not seen the sky full of light and ancient majestic city before he fainted, and if Qian Yu had not told him about the mysterious white light, he would not have found a reason to continue exploring the wasteland. Until 8 hours later, when he entered the deepest part of the wasteland, he suddenly made a discovery. 100 miles in front of him, a huge black shadow appeared vaguely, standing on the ground, motionless, exuding a majestic and vigorous aura. Finally, something has appeared. Even if it's an ancient beast, it's still better than nothing. In these 8 hours, he had not seen a single strand of hair, a single demonic beast, or a single tree. Now that he finally saw a black shadow, his spirits were immediately lifted, and he hurriedly flew over. Only when he got closer did he discover that this 100-meter-tall black shadow was an ancient dark brown statue. The statue depicted an ancient beast with a strange appearance. Half of its body was buried in the ground of the wasteland, and only the upper half of its body was exposed. The dark brown stone statue seemed to have experienced thousands of years, and had long been eroded by the passage of time. The rocks had been weathered into fine powder, falling down with a single touch. The huge beast's head was like a dragon's head, with a wide open mouth, a few long whiskers growing from the sides of the mouth, and a horn on its forehead. Ji Tianqing flew around the 100-meter-tall statue a few times, but still could not find any clues. It was just an ancient stone sculpture. There was no formation or hidden mechanism, and it was not a treasure. Ji Tianqing was a little disappointed, and could only bitterly leave, continuing to fly forward. However, he had only flown a few dozen miles when he saw another huge black shadow appear on the ground in front of him. It was also a dilapidated dark brown stone sculpture. It had collapsed on the desolate wasteland and was more than half buried. The surface of the stone sculpture had been weathered, and its shape was blurred. One could vaguely see that it was some kind of giant beast. Other than that, Ji Tianqing circled the stone sculpture a few times, but he didn't find any clues. Next, he continued to fly in the wasteland and found several more stone sculptures one after another. Almost all of the stone sculptures were old and broken, like dark brown hills. Some of them stood upright on the wasteland, some fell crookedly on the ground, their original appearances buried by the dust. Ji Tianqing sensed that something was amiss and stopped. He circled the area and observed the stone sculptures. This area was about 1,000 miles in radius. Several stone statues were scattered around this area, seemingly containing a faintly discernible mysterious aura. In the barren wasteland, there was nothing but these few statues. Such a strange and mysterious scene made Ji Tianqing fall into deep thought. There are a total of 9 ancient stone sculptures. They all seem to have experienced tens of thousands of years. They seem to be scattered randomly in the wasteland. I carefully examined each stone sculpture, but I didn't find any formations or mechanisms. These stone sculptures, just what secrets do they contain? He stood high in the sky, looking down at the wasteland below. He silently pondered, but he didn't have the slightest clue. Time quietly passed by. 2 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours had passed. When night fell once more, everything in the world was swallowed up by darkness. Ji Tianqing was still standing in the sky, looking down at the wasteland and observing the 9 ancient stone sculptures, trying to find some clues from them. At this moment, the old and vigorous voice of Burial of Heaven suddenly rang out in his mind. Tianqing, I remember now. Ji Tianqing was immediately awakened, a hint of pleasant surprise and expectation flashing in his eyes. He hurriedly asked, Burial of Heaven, what did you remember? Burial of Heaven said in a hazy voice, back then, Kenshin and I really did come here. However, as for why or what happened in between, I can't remember. My memories are fragmented, and I only have a few bits and pieces of information. In this area of 1,000 miles, those 9 ancient stone sculptures are a gate. A gate? A formation gate? Ji Tianqing immediately frowned and looked around in confusion. No, it's not an ordinary formation, Burial of Heaven said in a solemn voice. It's the Open Heaven Gate. Open Heaven Gate. Ji Tianqing's body shook, and his pupils shrank slightly. Although, he didn't understand the true meaning of these 4 words. But from the literal meaning, this name was definitely extraordinary. Ji Tianqing was somewhat excited and expectant. He hurriedly asked, Burial of Heaven, what does the Open Heaven Gate mean? Could it be related to that ancient legend? Burial of Heaven was silent for a moment, then said in a solemn voice, I don't know, but if you want to explore the true secrets of the buried star sea, you need to open the Open Heaven Gate. Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows, how do I open it? You can't open it, only I can help you. Burial of Heaven's tone became heavier and heavier, and there was a faint sense of desolation. In my current state, I might be able to help you open it, but my strength will be exhausted again, and I will need to sleep for at least half a year. After saying this, Burial of Heaven was silent, waiting for Ji Tianqing to make a decision. Ji Tianqing frowned, and his expression was solemn as he considered and weighed the pros and cons. He had spent so much effort, experienced so many twists and turns, and finally helped Burial of Heaven recover 30% of his strength. But now, Burial of Heaven wanted to help him open the open heaven gate, but he would have to pay a heavy price. Was it worth it? After a moment, he had an answer in his heart. He no longer hesitated and his eyes became resolute. He said to Burial of Heaven in a solemn voice, "Burial of Heaven, I need your help. In order to save my father, I can't give up any hope. Don't worry, after this, I will do everything I can to help you recover your strength." Burial of Heaven didn't say much, and only said one word calmly. "Okay." As soon as he finished speaking, he revealed his divine soul avatar. Swoosh! A blurry shadow in a black robe appeared out of nowhere in the sky. It stood in the air, and its aura was sacred and majestic, looking down on the world. Without the slightest hesitation, it immediately waved its wide sleeves and made a profound hand gesture, forming a mysterious and extraordinary seal. The world was dark, and there was no light, but there was an invisible mysterious force flowing, like thousands of rivers flowing, and then intertwining. Ji Tianqing stood in the sky with a solemn expression, silently watching Burial of Heaven's every move. Although he didn't know how Burial of Heaven was going to open the open heaven gate, he could feel the invisible subtle changes in the world within 1,000 miles. Chapter 841. Time passed silently. The figure of the Burial of Heaven was still standing in the night sky like a towering mountain. Its arms were constantly waving, and its gestures were unpredictable. Ji Tianqing was dazzled by its movements, and his mind was filled with fascination. He could roughly guess that the technique that the Burial of Heaven was using was definitely not something that a mortal could use. Even a transcendent expert in the soul refinement realm would not be able to comprehend and grasp it. Perhaps, only primordial soul supremes would be able to understand a little bit of it. Unknowingly, an hour had passed. The wasteland within a radius of 1,000 miles was actually covered by an invisible force. The 9 ancient stone statues scattered on the wasteland also strangely lit up with multicolored light, illuminating the world. The multicolored light became brighter and brighter, and finally covered a radius of 1,000 miles, making this area seem like a dream. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing's heartbeat quickened. He muttered to himself, "It's this kind of multicolored light. It's finally appeared again." Immediately after, an ancient and majestic black city appeared in the hazy multicolored light that covered the sky. The city occupied a radius of a few hundred miles. It was larger and more majestic than any city that Ji Tianqing had ever seen. Even the continent's holy land of the Martial Way, Middle State City, could not be compared to this ancient city. This ancient black city that seemed to have experienced tens of thousands of years was situated on the wasteland with a few majestic mountain ranges as its walls. Within the ancient city, the streets were wide, and there were rows upon rows of buildings. There were also countless majestic palaces with simple and unadorned designs. The style of these buildings and palaces were all things that Ji Tianqing had never seen before. It was as if they did not belong to this world. Ji Tianqing stood in the night sky above the ancient city. It was as if he could touch those majestic and sacred palaces with a stretch of his hand. However, all of this was illusory. It only existed in the multicolored light that filled the sky. The multicolored light and ancient city that he saw before he fainted appeared before his eyes again. It was so clear and lifelike. His heart was filled with excitement and anticipation. Finally, another hour passed. The Burial of Heaven finally stopped casting the technique and slowly retracted its arms. The majestic and ancient city slowly disappeared. The hazy multicolored light that filled the heavens and the earth also gradually converged and sank to the ground. In the end, the boundless multicolored light spread across the land, causing the desolate wasteland within a radius of 1,000 miles to become a dazzling land of 5 colors, like an incomparably huge mirror. Seeing this incredible and magical scene, Ji Tianqing's heartbeat quickened, and he was filled with amazement and excitement. He was incomparably curious and expectant. Just what kind of place was this, and what was the open heaven gate? At this moment, Burial of Heaven crossed his arms in front of him, his black robes fluttering in the wind. It was accumulating power. The shadow of its black robe became more and more blurry and transparent, as if it was gradually melting. Finally, when it had accumulated its strength to its limit, it opened its mouth and let out an ancient and vigorous roar. Split open the heavens. Following its roar, a gigantic black cloud vortex appeared in the dark sky. Within the vortex, a black shadow that was thousands of feet long suddenly appeared, carrying with it an incomparably terrifying power as it came crashing down from the sky. It was a black shadow that looked like a giant sword. Ji Tianqing was no stranger to it, and he instantly recognized it. It was the heaven-piercing sword steel. The dark brown heaven-piercing sword steel fell from the sky like a meteor, carrying with it an all-destroying power as it ruthlessly smashed down, striking the mirror-like multicolored land. Boom! Crack! An earth-shaking explosion erupted, reverberating through a radius of 1,000 miles. In that instant, Ji Tianqing saw with his own eyes that the multicolored land within a radius of 1,000 miles crumbled and shattered, turning into millions of multicolored fragments that dissipated with a bang. A destructive shockwave spread out in all directions, covering a radius of several thousand miles in the wasteland. In just a few breaths of time, the multicolored fragments that blotted out the sky had completely disappeared. The world returned to calm, and the loud explosion also gradually stopped. The heaven-piercing sword steel's power had been exhausted, and the lingering spiritual qi had all disappeared. It became dim, cold, and deathly still. Whoosh! The black-robed figure of the Burial of Heaven had long since dissipated, and the heaven-piercing sword steel had also vanished into thin air, returning to the Kenshin's tomb. Ji Tianqing stood in the sky, looking down at the scene below, a look of shock on his face. He saw that the land within a radius of 1,000 miles had been transformed into a vast lake. This vast lake was as clear as the sea, and its surface was as calm as a mirror. It could even clearly reflect the scene in the sky and his figure. The lake was as deep and serene as the deep blue sea, its bottom impossible to see. As Ji Tianqing was observing the lake, the voice of the Burial of Heaven resounded in his mind. Tianqing, the gate of heaven awakening has been opened. Hurry and go. The voice of the Burial of Heaven was somewhat weak. It was clear that it had exhausted all its strength in order to open the gate of heaven awakening. Ji Tianqing looked at the vast blue lake and asked in confusion, Burial of Heaven, this is the gate of heaven awakening? It's clearly a lake. Could it be that the gate of heaven awakening is hidden at the bottom of the lake? The voice of the Burial of Heaven was ancient and distant as it said, the ground beneath your feet is the sky of others. As it spoke, its voice grew weaker and weaker. By the time it reached the last word, it was almost inaudible. The Burial of Heaven only left behind this sentence before falling into a deep slumber. The ground beneath my feet is the sky of others. Ji Tianqing frowned, mulling over this sentence. He vaguely understood something, and a kind of enlightenment appeared in his heart. It's like a palace. I'm standing on the second floor, and the ground beneath my feet is the floor. But to the people on the first floor, it's the ceiling. Could it be that there's a secret realm hidden at the bottom of this lake? Or is it connected to another world? The sky of others. Who is the sky of others? Although he understood some things, he fell into even more confusion. Filled with anticipation and doubt, he descended from the sky and landed in the lake. Whoosh! He dived into the lake and swam to the bottom of the lake like a fish. The clear lake water was cool and did not have any temperature. It wrapped around his body, calming his mind and soul, allowing him to enter an ethereal state. If he cultivated in this lake, he could enter a miraculous state where he would forget about everything around him. Cultivation would be twice the result with half the effort, and it was very suitable for comprehending some profound secret techniques. But unfortunately, he was in a hurry and could not stay in the lake to cultivate in seclusion. He dived to the bottom of the lake at an extremely fast speed, and released his spiritual sense to explore the situation around him. However, there was nothing in the clear and cold lake water. There was nothing except for him. He dived to the bottom of the lake for a quarter of an hour, but he still could not see the bottom of the lake. He could only estimate that he had dived to a depth of over 100 miles. However, he believed in the words of the burial of heaven and dived to the bottom of the lake without hesitation. 2 hours passed. He dived to a depth of nearly 1,000 miles, but he still could not see the bottom of the lake. It was as if this lake had no bottom at all. However, at this time, he saw that there was a huge whirlpool in the dark lake below. Chapter 842. He was surrounded by lake water in all directions, and there was nothing in sight. Not far from his feet, there was a giant whirlpool that seemed to never stop swallowing the water. Ji Tianqing stopped and stood at the edge of the whirlpool. He frowned and thought for a while. Could that giant whirlpool be the open heaven door that the burial of heaven mentioned? This thought flashed through his mind. He hesitated for a while and then swam into the whirlpool. After all, he had no choice. Since he had decided to enter the lake, he had to keep going down. There was nothing in the lake except for the whirlpool. No matter where the whirlpool led to, no matter whether it was life-threatening or not, he had to go in. Swoosh! When he swam into the whirlpool, he was immediately engulfed by the terrifying devouring power and was pulled into the center of the whirlpool. Even though he was at Sky Origin Stage Level 7 and could unleash the power of a half-step soul-tempering stage cultivator, it was useless. He could not resist the devouring power of the mysterious whirlpool and was pulled into the whirlpool uncontrollably. Then, he was pulled into the center of the whirlpool and fell into the whirlpool along with the endless lake water. An incomparably powerful force fiercely suppressed his body and soul, causing his consciousness to become blurry. Gradually, he was about to fall unconscious. He wanted to get into the seal of mountains and rivers and protect himself with his magical treasure to avoid being killed by the whirlpool. However, he could not activate his magical treasure and fainted immediately. His consciousness fell into the endless darkness. In his unconscious state, he drifted along in the whirlpool and entered a passageway formed by the endless lake water. The tunnel was actually a giant water column that was about 10 miles wide. He did not know how long it was or where it led to. After a long time, Ji Tianqing slowly woke up. He gradually regained his sight and hearing. He heard the sound of splashing water coming from afar. It was getting closer and clearer. He slowly opened his eyes and saw the scenery around him. There was endless water around him. It was like a blue sea with waves that kept washing over him. He was like a piece of driftwood, floating on the surface of the sea and being washed by the waves. Fortunately, there were 2 huge black reefs beside him. He was stuck between 2 huge reefs, so he was not washed away by the waves. Where is this? His heart was filled with doubt as he muttered to himself, raising his head to look around. With one look, he was instantly stunned. 1,000 meters behind him, there was actually an incomparably huge dark brown city. This city was grand and ancient. It was constructed from dark brown rocks, and it seemed to be modeled with the passage of time as if it had experienced the passage of 10,000 years. Even though this ancient and majestic city was extremely dilapidated and seemed to have been broken down from the middle, only half of it was left. However, this dilapidated and ancient half-city still had a radius of over 200 miles. Moreover, the collapsed and damaged buildings and palaces in the city were of a style that he had never seen before. They were ancient and solemn. No. He had seen those houses and palaces. Not long ago, when the burial of heaven opened the heaven-opening door, an ancient and majestic city appeared in the sky full of multicolored light. However, the illusory image that appeared in the light was a complete ancient and majestic city. As for the ancient city behind Tianqing, it was as if it had experienced a massive earthquake, or as if it was a city of ruins that had been destroyed by a war between gods. This majestic ancient city stood on the boundless sea, silently enduring the erosion of time and the erosion of the sea, and still standing tall. Tianqing stared at the mysterious ancient city, and his heart was filled with shock. So, the multicolored light that I saw in the wilderness was this ancient city. I actually came here after I entered the vortex. After a long time, he calmed down and looked up at the sky again. When he saw the scene in the sky clearly, his body suddenly shook, and his face was full of shock. He saw that in the infinitely high blue sky, there was a dim yellow sun. The dim sunlight was shining on the boundless sea. And that blue sky was actually the boundless blue sea. The boundless blue sea seemed to be blocked by a layer of transparent and invisible mirror, separating it from this world. Seeing this scene, he recalled the words of the burial of heaven. The ground under your feet is the sky for others. Now, Tianqing saw this magical scene with his own eyes and finally understood. At the same time, he also understood one thing. He was no longer in the buried star sea, and he was no longer in the grey wasteland. In fact, he was no longer in the original world, and he had come to another strange world. Open the gate of heaven. Open the gate of heaven and enter another world. I see. He understood everything, and his heart was filled with shock and excitement. At this time, he saw that there was a huge hole in the blue sky hundreds of miles to the east. Endless blue sea water leaked out from the hole, forming a huge water column that was thousands of miles high, pouring into the sea. The sea of the world above is the sky of this world. There is a hole in the sky, and endless sea water leaks out, turning this place into a vast sea. I understand now. That hole is the vortex at the bottom of the lake, and I came to this world by following that water column. Tianqing stared at the water column that connected the sky to the sea, and murmured with a complicated expression. It was the first time in his life that he had seen such a magical scene, and the shock in his heart could be imagined. The experience and knowledge of these few hours had completely overturned his understanding of the world, as if a door had been opened for him, allowing him to see a whole new world. He looked up at the blue sky, and after observing for a while, he quickly saw several more holes in the sky. Endless sea water poured out from each hole, forming an indomitable blue water column that connected the sky and the sea. He counted a total of 4 holes in the sky, and they were located in 4 different directions of the ancient city. Each hole had a radius of more than 10 miles, and endless sea water was pouring out at every moment. Tianqing gradually calmed down, and he flew out of the blue sea toward the ancient city. He had a premonition that the mysterious ancient city must be hiding a huge secret. A moment later, he entered the dilapidated ancient city and flew 100 meters above the ground. He slowed down and observed the city at a close distance, using his spiritual sense to explore everything in the city. The ancient city was desolate and silent, and there was no sound. The cracked and twisted stone streets, the collapsed and broken houses, and the dilapidated walls and fences that had been weathered by the wind seemed to be silently telling a story of the ancient past. There was not a single blade of grass in the city, and there was not a trace of green, and there was no breath of life. Tianqing looked around, and in the ancient city that was 200 miles in radius, there were only endless dark brown ruins. However, the ruins of the buildings could show that the creatures that once lived here must have been an extremely powerful race. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.